Gaming.
Vai tomando muito dano do lava.
Bola de fogo da ponta do recado.
Get the rest of the defense off. Oh my word!
Perfeita.
Four in a row for Team Queso.
The opening weekend of our fall split was filled with everything you hope for in Clash Royale League. Sweeps, games going down to the last second, drama, of course, and it will only get better this weekend as we have a stacked lineup today, this Saturday. 3 returning championship teams looking to continue their Western fall split in top form. Hello and welcome. I'm Rich Slayton. Joining me, as always, my friend Andrew Guy to talk you through the action here for CRL West Fall Split. Andrew, last weekend was absolutely nuts, and this weekend we kick off with a rematch of our semifinals between Tribe and Spacestation Gaming.
I mean, Tribe did not even drop a set until halfway through their match with SSG. They're looking for redemption. They're looking for revenge today. But first, before we get into that, because I cannot wait to get into that match. I think a lot of people thought that was going to be the championship match. Whoever won that was going to be the person that went on to win the entire thing. But first, where are you watching us? You watching us on Twitch? You watching us on YouTube? Make sure you're following on Twitch, subscribed on YouTube, and the notifications are turned on both platforms. That way you can watch us dual screen. You know, you can watch us every single Saturday and Sunday morning. It's important, so turn those notifications on. Also, follow us on, no, not Twitter today, but you can follow us on Twitter. We're doing something else, something new. StatsRoyale.com. We are doing break time battles. So make sure you go to Stats Royale, you find that CRL West Fall 2020 tab, and you follow along because tomorrow afternoon, we're going to be announcing something called Break Time Battles, where not only will you guys get to decide which teams you're really rooting for, but you'll also get to play for the chance to play against a pro live on stream. Yes, all that. Pack it in. It all makes sense. You heard correctly. You can win the chance to play against a pro on stream. Hey, and then maybe we even, next year we could add you to our fantasy lineups. Rich, you posted yours. I posted mine. They're both on Twitter. We both have Michifu in our lineups, which I love. I think it's a great, great pick. He's a guy that's going to be out in 2v2 and could dominate in King of the Hill. Fantasy Royale, get those lineups set every single weekend before we go live on Saturday.
Yeah, a couple of news updates for you as well, Andrew. First, some unfortunate news. Pain Gaming, with maybe a bit of a coaching error here, 4 penalties already in the opening weekend, meaning they've actually been penalized an entire match victory. So their final record, whatever win-loss will be less one whole match. That's insane in this league, Andrew.
It's inexcusable. It's unforgivable. It's happened before with Pain. They've had penalties in the past, and these penalties are based off of people accepting games too early. That is a completely fixable situation with the correct coaching. Pain Gaming now gets a huge win last weekend. It's negated by this loss. No, they don't lose the win, but they add a loss. So this is just massive when you talk about mistakes being made by squads that are completely avoidable.
Yeah, it's a rough one, but on the other side, good news, exciting news announced on the Clash Royale Twitter. 2 new cards coming in Shocktober, as they call it. Andrew, it's been a while since we've had any new card update, been a couple of months, but 2 new cards in the same month. It's going to be pretty impactful for the esports scene.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of freaks me out and also gets me really, really excited to see how quickly the meta is going to shift as we get into those new cards affecting competitive play. So, those won't be coming into effect today. They'll be coming in later in October, as you just said. But what will be coming up in just a moment is going to be SSG and Tribe. I'm feeling real good about this one, Rich.
It was a wild one. We'll, of course, get to that one in a minute. But first, let's take a look at the matches we have coming up today and tomorrow. Match week 2. And, of course, Andrew, as always, we have 2 teams doing double duty. 2 top-tier teams who'll be appearing twice this weekend.
Yeah, and I think that had a big, big effect on who we chose for our fantasy lineups. If you don't have anyone from SK or Tribe, you might be making a mistake. So as we said, SSG and Tribe kicking things off today. Then it'll be Cream, Real, Betis going up against Dignitas, and closing out the day will be SK and Team Queso. That is a massive, massive match for both of them and everyone watching. Tell me about tomorrow, Rich.
The defending world champions Team Liquid up against Chivas Esports Diego B, facing off against his former squad. Then Tribe Gaming makes their second appearance against Misfits. We'll see how that young 2v2 duo does against, right now, the undefeated pair of Buffmac and Azelis. And then finally, Pain Gaming tries to bounce back from this massive penalty against SK, who probably will be looking forward to that match after a very, very difficult one against the veterans of Team Queso.
Yeah, very, very difficult. And why don't we actually start right there with our week predictions? Team Queso and SK is really, really interesting because I actually give the edge to SK, not even just the edge, I give them a pretty favorable matchup when it comes to 2v2. But then the question mark falls in King of the Hill and 1v1 with the way that IMJP and Ruben are playing right now, respectively 2 and 1. How does SK get through them if, let's say, Javier or Morton are not quite on their game today?
I don't know. I mean, I picked SK in this one, but I give it a 55-45 matchup for SK maybe. I think that they win the 2v2 pretty handily, but then the question is, can Queso beat them in King of the Hill and 1v1 back-to-back? Because of that hill, I give it 55-45 to SK, but it's a tight one.
Yeah, so in the first match of the day, we talked about how Tribe hadn't even dropped a set until halfway through the playoffs against SSG. Do you think SSG repeats today? Because I personally think Tribe needs this win. They're going to play with a chip on their shoulder, and I think they might take it.
It's hard to bet against RF in 2v2, but I'm going to do it here today. He's not with his partner, Akrap, who's still suspended for one more week. He and Lapo were good last week, but against mid-tier competition, and Azelis and Buffmac are not mid-tier competition in 2v2, I'm picking Tribe today.
All right, let's go check our first match out, SSG versus Tribe.
They are the most stacked, most powerful roster in this league, except for maybe Spacestation Gaming. That's a close tie between those two.
Definitely is the match of the week. In my opinion, whoever wins that is going to be top 2 in this league.
You trying to beat it out, Long trying to
He's
get there.
He's going to beat it. He beats it. Oh wow. My. And you look at him, he looks over it, most likely, crap, going, oh my God.
É num ótimo momento, então acredito que nessa partida específica não dá pra ter favorito. Vai ser suficiente, a Tribe já finaliza o 2-2.
Que a Spacestation leva um pouco de vantagem. Então vamos ver aí. Tá incrível, rapaziada.
Y casi pero partida ahora con ese cementerio pega un Narri, GG, well played.
This is going to be a huge battle of what should be the top 2 teams of the season. So here we go, jumping into the rematch of our semifinals from last split. It was Tribe Gaming, who not only was undefeated throughout the regular season, but won the first 2 sets, had Spacestation Gaming on the ropes, and then battled back, did SSG, a big part of that being Samuel Basoto with the huge performance in King of the Hill. The reverse sweep in the overall match to go on, and then, of course, become our defending Western champions. It will be Lapo and RF in 2v2, Samuel Basoto in the head-to-head play, and AC again waiting one more week before he's back in the mix, Andrew.
Yeah, and Tribe on the other side of it, repping red today. How appropriate. They will be our away team. TNT, after a massive first match last weekend, going to be coming back out today. Azelis and Buffback most likely going to be that 2v2 duo. And will we see the debut of Jupiter King today? Who knows? To elaborate on what you were just saying, they were up 2-1 and 2-1 in the first 2 sets. Then Lapo swept Buffmac 2-0. RF swept Jupiter King 2-0. And then they ran into Samuel Basoto and King of the Hill. So it was really, really the head-to-head play that spoke volumes for SSG in their last match.
They were phenomenal. They were absolutely phenomenal, but it all starts with the 2v2. It will be RF and Lapacati one more time, as AC, as we said before, is still on suspension. Giant Skeleton the ban. And then, of course, Buffmac and Azelis for Tribe Gaming have become a powerful duo, banning Tornado. And in case you're not keeping track, Azelis does by far have the #1 win rate career-wise amongst 2v2 players at 74%. No one is even close. The next closest player is at 62% for a career win rate in this first and opening set.
Yeah, just incredible what he's done since he shifted into that 2v2. So let's hop into it. The rematch of our semis 2v2 between Tribe and Spacestation Gaming.
So here we go. You can see Tribe Gaming top of your screen, Spacestation Gaming at the bottom, and RF and Lapo did perform well last week, but again, last week was a different level of competition against Buffmac and Azealis, who are still pretty much perfect as a pair. Buffmac 30-21 overall in 2v2, but with Azealis currently 12-3 in games.
It's just, those numbers are astounding. And, you know, speaking of 2v2, this does feel like, if we're talking about revenge and redemption and all that, you know that RF wants to pick up a 2v2 set win against this squad. Even if it's with a different partner, Lapo, instead of AC because of the situation, RF still is a very competitive guy, and this is one of the only squads that has his number in 2v2.
Andrew, are my eyes deceiving me? Did I get hit in the head? I think I see 3 Musketeers on Tribe Gaming side.
3 Muskies in 2v2. Who knows how this is going to work? The amount of spell value that you're going to need to get is absolutely incredible here for RF and Lapacati. They're going to have to be really, really careful with those large spells, and then we'll see how Buffmac and Azealis in turn try to punish them for those being out of cycle.
I am very, very curious about this. I cannot remember ever seeing 3 Musketeers in 2v2, Andrew, and the amount of big spells that are typically held between 2 players is usually the reason why you don't see the ladies.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, and, you know, SSG might be fortunate here. If you look at the amount of splash damage they have, they've already shown 2 small spells with the Valkyrie and the Mega Knight. Those are all going to be great responses to those, you know, big pushes coming across the river with the Musketeers in the behind and the 6-man up front.
Look, we've seen Buff and Azealis do things that are outside of the box in 2v2 before. We've seen them do E-Golem inside of 2v2. We've seen them do crazy clone stuff that you wouldn't expect. We have seen Buff and Azealis kind of go outside of the central 2v2 meta, so one more time here for the Frenchman and the Brit.
You know, and when you're that good, you gotta keep things fresh. That's one of the reasons why you're the #1 2v2 duo out there. So I commend them for continuing to be innovative when it comes to 2v2. And look at this, a really, really nice Graveyard push there. The Mega Knight crosses the river, Graveyard comes in, easily tanked for, and now we go Balloon Graveyard opposite Rich.
3M Balloon Freeze. This is absolutely nuts. This almost feels like just a random game of 2v2 where 2 players ended in with completely different decks as a random match.
I could not agree more. 3 Musketeer Graveyard Loon Freeze with the 6-man. There's a reason why they chose it, but as of right now, Lapo and RF have not given them a chance to let this deck shine.
And look at this, it's a 2-2 split with the Musketeers. 2 to the left and 2 to the right. So you've got Muskies all over the board. Of course, Poison and Log take care of business on the left-hand side. We are in sudden death overtime. And right now, Spacestation Gaming firmly in control.
Yeah, this is really, really tough because what's going to happen every single time that Buffmac and Azealis get a push coming across the river that they want to throw a balloon behind or a Graveyard in front of, that Mega Knight is going to come down. So here we go. Mega Knight is out of cycle. There's the balloon coming through. What?
Freeze in high, Graveyard in low. And you see what they're going for here, Andrew, but you gotta wonder about spending that much elixir on one push.
Well, that's a defensive freeze, Rich. That was a defensive freeze that came out from Lapacati, so now we see both squads rocking the freeze here, but SSG has not been able to use theirs offensively. And, the moment that defense starts to become, or that freeze becomes a necessity on defense, you can be in trouble.
Here we go. Look at this crazy split here. A 6-man, 3 Musketeers split, Royal Recruits in both lanes, and now it's a 2-2 split of Musketeers. And there's just so much spell value on the board, Andrew.
Tons of spell value left-hand side. Right now, though, feels like the moment on the right-hand side where Buffmac and Azealis maybe need to sell out. No, they go for the swerve left.
Final 38 seconds, freeze in, Fireball, trying to make some room, Balloon raged up, can it get on tower, but check it out, wow. Snowball does stop the Musketeers on the right. Solid defense here by Space Station.
And Space Station Gaming, the hunter, the clutch player for them. Left-hand side, right-hand side, doesn't matter, you drop it right on top of the balloon, and it has been the game changer.
Look, Space Station's in the lead, but even with 15 seconds, anything can happen here. Balloon, Graveyard, and freeze.
Rich!
Here's a big freeze on the left-hand side. Graveyard all over that tower. Spell cycle in. Splitting the spell cycle here is Tribe Gaming. What is going on?
Skellies are on the tower. They should have cycled left. They might have been able to steal it. Too much attention being split. Too much elixir being split. And it was mayhem there at the end. It felt like they just kind of lost their minds and should have focused left-hand side.
Well, there were so many crazy things going on in the deck of Buffmac and Azelis. It was kind of all over the place, and we'll take a look at the cards here in just a moment, but I'm not surprised that was kind of a chaotic deck with so many cards playing like similar but different roles, right? Balloon and Graveyard, the Royal Recruits and the Three Musketeers. It's not shocking to me they got a little bit lost there at the end.
Yeah, and just to let everyone know that is watching, it sounds like there's a bit of an audio delay going on right now. We appreciate your patience. Once again, dealing with this online has been a bit of a challenge at times, so, you know, just pretend like you're living in the future. All right, here we go. RF and Lapo left-hand side. Graveyard, double Graveyard with the freeze really ended up paying off because of that first massive push with the Mega Knight coming across the river, maybe a bit earlier than Buffmac and Azelis had expected, because they did have that 6-man the Royal Recruits dropped in the back. That being said, this was a pretty incredible deck that they brought out that almost paid off.
Yeah, and it was just one drop that could have made the difference. You see the push here on the left-hand side, the Graveyard in, the Balloon in, and it's just one of those things where maybe the freeze should have been saved for the Graveyard later and not worried about the Balloon. It's hard to call because this deck is, again, like I said, kind of all over the place, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting about what you say there is that if they do hold that freeze, they bait out the Hunter up high, then they can catch the Valkyrie inside the freeze. The Hunter's going to be too far away to focus on the skeletons, and maybe, just maybe, those little Larrys get a handful of hits in to give you the lead. So yeah, hindsight's 20/20, but I do agree that doubling down on that front end with the Hunter always being there maybe wasn't the correct move for Tribe.
You know, I like Tribe Gaming innovating, and they do this a lot often in game number one. We've seen it over and over from them. They take out something kind of crazy in game one and recover in games 2 and 3. And maybe they feel like RF paired with Lapo is an opportunity to experiment a bit. But after what we saw last weekend, it seems ill-advised to me to not take Lapo seriously in 2v2 as RF's partner.
Oh, I completely agreed. I think if anyone does that, it's a massive, massive mistake. Lapacati is one of the best in the game, and we've talked about that transition from being an incredible head-to-head player that's great at the micro, moving into 2v2, and it's almost, you know, you really do have that other half of your brain there to help you out. So RF and Lapo starting off strong here against Tribe, and this could be the first time that Tribe drops that 2v2 set.
It's possible. Currently 6-0 as a pair are Azelis and Buffmac, and Azelis, of course, top tier in 2v2, number 1 win rate overall. Took a bit of a hit in that one. You know, I'm wondering, Andrew, if they were thinking about, because knowing the language barrier, because knowing that Lapo and RF aren't near each other, just trying to confound them with something that would cause confusion on the board. Maybe, you know, RF and Lapo not having a game plan of where to play stuff and being unable to communicate about where to play stuff in those moments.
Yeah, let's see if here in game number 2, Tribe goes right down the middle, or if they keep switching things up for Spacestation Gaming.
Here we go, jumping right on into the action. Spacestation currently up 1. Remember, the bans are Giant Skeleton and Tornado, 2 pretty common bans in the 2v2 set.
You know, what you said there had me thinking a little bit about, you know, last week we were talking about how the best duos and the best players play decks that allow their opponents to make mistakes. And I think that's exactly what you were saying with that last matchup. Had Azelis and Buff run into maybe a lesser 2v2 duo, it would have been so hard to manage all those things coming across the river offensively.
Sure. I mean, I think that's maybe what they were going for, and hoping that RF and Lapo were a lesser 2v2 duo for this particular situation, but wasn't the case in game number 1, and now you see that Buffmac and Azelis going from one side, a completely out-of-the-box deck, to pretty much right down the middle here with Lava.
Yeah, so this is going to be really interesting for Lapo and RF to be able to keep up that dual lane pressure so that those Lava Hound pushes can't really come down the lane fully supported. And then when they do come down fully supported, probably in double and triple elixir time, how will RF and Lapo juggle those balloons coming behind with the mortars?
90 seconds left. Lava Hound at the bridge. And Fireball pushes the Muskie back, though she will stay on the board for a moment. Snowball to clear out the rest of that, but Spear's on the board as well.
Yeah, and great use of the Spear Goblins being on the opposite side of the Musketeer, just not giving any spell value. Very, very simple, basic maneuver there, but obviously when you do it in gameplay, it's really important to point out.
It's interesting to see that they're essentially running the most popular Grand Challenge deck in the game right now, Space Station, with Mortar Skeleton Barrel. This deck is all over the place in Grand Challenges at the moment. And curious seeing it here in 2v2. So far, Mortar's doing their job.
Yeah, I mean, look, this deck cycles so quickly, and those Mortars coming down offensively can come down defensively in the same sequence without even breaking a sweat. It is so easy to get back around those 4 cards. That's one of the things I love most about this deck when playing against heavy beatdown decks, whether in the sky or on the ground.
2 Musketeers down. Skeleton Dragons high to work on 1. And look at that value lightning, taking the Musketeers off down to 882 on the right-hand side. Tribe Gaming way in the lead, or slightly behind, actually. Sorry, a little bit of a mix-up there. 868 to 882.
Yeah, it's, the Lightning becomes kind of the equalizer in this matchup. The Musketeer really being your integral part of defense. You need it for the defense when you're talking about single target DPS, and you obviously need it to go to the skies. That Lightning coming in is going to be brutal. So now you see that Musketeer being played up really, really high.
Miner in, Skeleton Barrel on, Poison down. 2-0 for Space Station Gaming. RF and Lapacati, and you see Lapo pumped up there.
Look at that. This is the thing that you love about watching these competitive guys slip into a role and excel, whether it's Zealies moving from head-to-head to 2v2, Buffmac, or Lapacati now following suit. Look at how hyped he is, and RF is like, yeah, man, I've been doing this for season after season after season. Welcome to 2v2.
Look, we mentioned this the other day when we had these two guys playing together. This duo scrimmed with another CRL team to prepare for this opening couple of weekends, and RF and Lapacati went 12-0 against that other CRL level duo. Yeah. So keep that in mind. This is no joke here, and I don't care where he plays it. You put Mortar in Lapacati's hands, there's going to be some trouble.
I couldn't agree more, and you love the slight shift here. It really, really paid off. There's no Goblin Gang in either deck here. There's more spell power, and of course the bats to help with things in the skies. And for them, they got a great matchup here. You've got Poison, you got Fireball, you got Snowball. That's so much to deal with the Lava Hound coming onto your Princess Tower and however they want to support it. But on the back end, you saw Lapo and RF continuously use their Knights and Skeleton Barrels to protect their DPS doers. It was so wonderfully executed by Space Station.
That's a huge opening win here for Space Station Gaming. And again, you understand the idea that Tribe Gaming went with in game number 1, but I'm still wondering how much that had an effect, how much they maybe underestimated RF and Lapo in this situation. And that seems like a deck that maybe you pull out against one of the rookie duos, right? Maybe you pull it out against the duo from Misfits or duo from Pain, just knowing that they aren't as experienced at this level, maybe a bit less, a bit more nervous. Doing that against RF and Lapo just seems like a mistake in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I like the things you pointed out. I mean, definitely, if there is a true language barrier there and you have to deal with that many offensive weapons in a singular moment, it feels like, yeah, they would make a mistake, but this is Lapacati and the God RF we're talking about. So a huge 2v2 set win for Space Station Gaming. But you actually pointed out some numbers to me before the match that I think the audience would love to hear about. Our man, TNT, because it's not actually Jupiter King who's the most impressive when it comes to head-to-head on Tribe.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Tribe Gaming, all 4 players are in the top 9 overall career win rates in Clash Royale play. It's absolutely insane. And the top 2 players, TNT and Jupiter King. Jupiter King slightly ahead at 67% to Jupiter King 65%. But Jupiter King has played 12 total games. TNT has a 65% win rate in CRL over 88 games played. So that's absolutely insane, the level he's put on for multiple seasons in a row. No one's doing anything like that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jupiter King maybe have had a more exciting previous season here in the spring, but those numbers don't lie. Consistency speaks volumes. That's what legacies and legends are built off of, is people that are consistent at the highest level for a very long time. And the fact that TNT has done that, it's why Tribe and Sean Kim picked him up. So yes, we are working on our audio right now. We are hoping that you guys can bear with us and be patient. But I think you and I both thought this 2v2 set was going to be more of a coin toss. It felt like it could go either way. Now that it's in the hands of SSG, if we just kind of forget that happened, who do you give the edge to in King of the Hill? Let's say this is the first set. King of the Hill is the first set. Who do you give it to?
What? How do you even begin to address that question? Right? You have RF, Lapo, and Samuel, and Lapo is one of the top 3 or top 4 win rates overall, career-wise, and head-to-head play, and play overall. Unbelievably talented player. Samuel, of course, is finally putting his ladder play into action here in competitive play, and then RF is having the best 2020 of anybody. But then look at who they're against. TNT and Jupiter King alone are insane, and then you can switch in Azelius or Buff to top-tier players. It's really one of those things where it just feels like whichever team can get someone to win 2 in this King of the Hill wins the set, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you know, one thing that you said there in the middle that was really interesting to me is I love Azelius. I really do. I think obviously you and I had our opinions about him in 2017, and he had his own opinions about himself not being dialed in. But since then, he's just been an incredible guy to watch. Last week, we saw that he was actually in the King of the Hill lineup instead of Buffmac, which I found really surprising. That's why I front-loaded this with saying I love Azelius, but I don't think I would ever choose Azelius over Buff in head-to-head play, but there must be something that Tribe knows that we don't, because seeing him there, you know they're expecting to win, you know that they want to win, and you know that they're ready for him to play if necessary. So why do you think it's him, or do you think they're just trying to keep their opponents guessing? Is he playing better than Buff in the offseason? Like, what's up?
I think they'll probably go back and forth a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see Buff in one of the 2 King of the Hills this weekend and Azelius in the other, just to split the load of deck prep for this weekend. And they're both completely capable of not just killing it in King of the Hill, but sweeping King of the Hills, right? Azelius career-wise, 2 King of the Hill sweeps in CRL, and Buffmac with 3. And of course, this whole team is stacked in the King of the Hill sweep selection. So I think it's really just going to be on a workload weekend like this. I think we'll see both players just depending on how they feel, who matches up better with which squad today and tomorrow.
And I guess the last kind of thing to throw into the equation, one more little wrench there is, you know, SSG went to King of the Hill a handful of times. Tribe only went to King of the Hill once, and it was against SSG when they lost. Now, obviously, that's a BO5 instead of BO3, so it was the last set. But the fact that SSG is a team that is used to playing in King of the Hill, maybe that gives them a slight edge. So let's take a look at our rosters, and cool, man. I love this.
Yeah, this is phenomenal. I mean, no questions here. Samuel, Lapo, and RF as the anchor. That's what you expect. Other side of it, last weekend it was TNT, Azelius, Jupiter King. Today it's TNT, Buff, Jupiter King. My expectation is that we see Azelius in their matchup tomorrow from a deck prep situation. And here we go. We're going to start off with 2 phenomenal players. TNT, the best win rate in CRL amongst active players for CRL West. And Samuel, arguably the #1 ladder player of all time.
Yeah, and you know, Samuel Basoto here making his fall 2020 debut. Didn't have to show up last match because RF kind of took it and ran with it. Man, I actually have chills right now because I'm so excited about this matchup.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I mean, this matchup overall, I'm talking top to bottom for this team. There isn't a single game here that on its own wouldn't get tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube.
So this is pretty interesting. I mean, we basically know what we're going to see on both sides of the board here already, and I'm sure that the gentlemen sitting at their devices feel the exact same way. Now it's about how they want to attack.
TNT probably running the 6 Loon, it looks like. And for those of you who've asked, by the way, why Andrew and I call Royal Recruits 6-man, I'll tell the story very quickly. During the AMG Cup, it was Razor against Jack from Japan in a matchup, and they were asking Jack what card he wanted to ban, and he didn't know the English for Royal Recruits, so he said 6-man, and it was Razor who figured out what he meant. But everyone thought it was such a charming moment between these 2 competitors, and thought 6-man was such a great nickname that amongst a lot of the casting community, it kind of stuck. So if you hear us call the Royal Recruits 6-man, that's where it comes from. Shout out to Jack, one of the greats in the game.
Yeah, I know. I actually do love that story, and I think 6-man's such a better name because we do talk about so much how the split is for 2 splits, you know, being an example of one direction or the other. So here we go. Both guys, we know what their win conditions are. They're both playing very, very soft here in the beginning, and now we see that Lumber Loon push coming in the right-hand side. Oh, no!
And you see Samuel immediately grab onto his hair. He knows that he just absolutely threw complete misclick error. I don't know if that was a misclick or the drag problem, whatever it was. My guess from his reaction is it was a misclick because you didn't see him throw his hands in the air. You saw him more despondent. and you can't make a mistake like that against TNT.
Oh, God, it hurts. It hurts just to see it happen, and that's one of the reasons why I feel like we're blessed to have the player cams this season, because you can see just exactly what went through Basoto's mind in that moment. So here we go, going on the offensive to try to redeem that horrible sequence.
This is already a challenging matchup for Samuel anyway, because, you know, between the Royal Recruits and the Skeleton Dragon Heel Spirit combination, there are so many responses TNT had for Graveyard.
Yeah.
To make a mistake like that, lose an early tower, throw away 5 Elixir, and, you know, a desperation attempt on the left-hand side. It was already a difficult matchup, but you certainly don't want to go out like that.
I couldn't agree with you more. There's so many ways, if TNT plays this correctly, to cycle the 6-man in the back, meet the knight at the river with maybe a fisherman or a lumberjack. All of a sudden, Samuel doesn't have his tank in cycle anymore. There's just so much about this that make it difficult. You add that into the graveyard being dropped instead of most likely the skeleton dragons, and it changes everything. Samuel trying to push that balloon towards his goblin cage ends up graveyarding, and that's going to do it for him today.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal, and you can see the one thing he wants is to maybe get off camera here.
Yeah.
So much. It's just so frustrating. Who hasn't fat-fingered, who hasn't made a misclick, who hasn't played the wrong card, who hasn't been susceptible to one of those moments? But this is definitely not the place you want to do it, and that's a rough one here for Samuel.
Yeah, and you can see here in the chat, guys, I'm looking at what you're seeing here on Twitch, and a lot of people, they all get it. We've all been there. They're all hurting for Samuel. I think we all were looking for maybe a bit better of a back and forth, but you know what? TNT did exactly what you're supposed to do. He went on the offense, his opponent made a mistake, and he defended excellently for the rest of the game.
So Samuel now starts off his fall campaign 0-1. TNT, maybe a small asterisk here, but not a big one because it was a good matchup overall, and TNT might have won this, most likely would have won this with his skill level, but 4-0 so far to start his season in CRL West Fall.
Yeah, you know, and this is exactly how a guy like that gets the numbers that you just talked about. Such good plays, patient. They were both very patient in the beginning, but I mean, you know, when you look at the replay, there's really nothing to say about this other than that Samuel lost this match. TNT did win, but it was really more about how Samuel lost it on his own.
Man, that one, that's a harsh one, and you have to imagine there'll be some conversations and getting him back on track. He's the guy for 1v1. If they lose this King of the Hill, he has to come back out, regroup, refocus, and get himself back in a mental spot to win. So you have to imagine that right now, Trainer Luis isn't worried about Lapo and RF. They'll go out and play their King of the Hills. They have their deck selections, I'm sure, already prepared. He's going to go ahead and spend these next 5, 10, 15 minutes talking with Samuel, getting him ready for the 1v1 if they do, in fact, get there.
You know, and that is one thing that Trainer Luis is so great at, is keeping his teammates and keeping his players' heads high. It's really important, especially because Samuel, you know, how does that not tilt you? How does that not when you're the head-to-head guy and that's your first showing of the season?
Coming up next, here we go. Lapo in against TNT. And just a bar barrel to open things up against the Skeleton Dragons. You see the flying piles of bones going both directions. And what a nice set of arrows there, getting the Heal Spirit as well. TNT putting on a show here so far in the opening moments of Game 2.
Yeah, TNT now, you know, what, 5-0? 4-0 in a season? Doing okay.
Yeah, doing okay, and Lapo immediately knows that he's up against that Lava Miner deck.
Yep.
Probably the one with arrows and zap, so we'll see how he fares as time goes on.
Nice barrel there to keep the knight alive for just a bit longer. Lapo gonna let this push die now that he's getting a little bit of damage in. Really nice for him.
Yeah, Musketeer will get a little bit off on that Lava Hound on the left-hand side as we pass the first minute of gameplay.
Great night there. Really, really great night there. You saw the Heal Spirit cycled in the back to come back and get that knight out front so that those Skeleton Dragons could not kill his Skeleton Dragon. So really, really nice play there, kind of looking into the mind of his opponent by Lapo.
Halfway through the opening 3 minutes, and a slight, ever so slight lead for Lapo on the left-hand side, 20-33 to 20-55.
And nice
TNT
barrel there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got nothing else to do, so you cycle the barrel, look to get a little bit of damage, you force a spell out of your opponent, and that zap being off the board is going to be helpful when you talk about spell damage coming in on either the Dragons or the Musketeer.
Barbs high here to protect the Inferno Dragon. Keeping that burner on the board a little bit longer, but Muskie Skelly Dragon combination. And
there it is.
Here we go. Graveyard in. Arrows to play high against the support, but will this backfire?
Just beautiful execution there by Lapo. The reaction time from the young Belarusian is something that has never ceased to amaze me. It's like he's always got a card in the chamber. Like that knight coming down to protect his musketeer in front of those barbarians, it felt instantaneous.
Well, both these guys definitely playing the cycle game, keeping track of the opponent and making good calls so far. At the moment, though, it is Lapacati starting to pull ahead a little bit, 1448 to 1922. TNT having difficulty getting to the second level.
Yeah, I think TNT's getting a little bit too excited there. You saw him drop those barbs behind the tower, maybe waiting for that graveyard to come in, but just giving massive poison value to his opponent, who now in turn gets a great graveyard in on the barbs again with the spell value.
And the Musketeer doesn't get a shot. Nice cleanup zap, but the Skeleton Dragon probably putting this out of reach for TNT at this stage.
No miner comes in. TNT trying to sell out here, knowing that he has to take a tower, and he has to do it now.
Perfect knight placement by Lapo to protect the Musketeer. That's a GG, well played. And Lapo goes for the little bit of extra, getting the King Tower activated as well with the poison, evening things up at 1-1.
Look, I have to keep highlighting the knight play by Lapacati there. It was absolutely superb. Every single time that a knight was a place that TNT did not want it, Lapacati had it there. Whether it was to protect the musketeer there at the end, as you saw, or the amount of times he protected the musketeer as she crossed the river. That was the reason why TNT lost the game, is because too much elixir was spent and it wasn't on getting that muskie off the board.
With that loss, TNT's career win rate in CRL drops to an abysmal 64%. I know, it's absolutely insane to be fighting at that clip here, right? Lapacati taking game number 2, evening things up against TNT, handing him his first loss of the season. And coming up next will be Buffmac. We'll get to that one in just a moment, but first we'll look at some of the action from this Lapo versus TNT match in just a couple of moments here. And you have a lot of pieces. You're looking at what Lapo put together here in the graveyard, the bomb tower, musketeer, skeleton dragons, and the poison. A lot of tools here, and he controlled the match very well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that first graveyard push, you saw his opponent try to drop a unit right in the thick of it. I believe it was a bar barrel, maybe coupled with arrows, and just not able to take everything off the board. You get the knight up front, the musketeer in the middle, and the skeleton dragons behind, and it's so much DPS, whether it's single target or splash, becomes really hard to deal with. Lapo saw his opening there and went in with the graveyard. Just really, really nice plays, because if you ever pull the trigger on that graveyard too early, we all know how brutal that can be. Not quite the same as Samuel's, but still brutal.
It's interesting to see that Samuel and Lapo both coming out deck number 1 with Graveyard.
Yeah.
Teammate, of course, one of the greatest Graveyard players of all time in the God RF. And I'm wondering if it's partially because they're playing with and against it so much, playing against RF, and maybe it's partially because they think it's a good matchup, how they view the overall deck pool of TNT.
Yeah, so here we go. TNT taking a seat for the rest of the day. Buffmac going up against Lapacati, and as you were just saying, Rich, we'll see if SSG keeps on the trend of rocking the graveyard in 1v1.
It's so weird to think that of the 4 players on Tribe Gaming, Buffmac has the lowest win rate career-wise, but that's still a phenomenal 58%.
Yeah, it seems impossible, but then I guess that does really speak to the talent on that roster.
He has been one of the top King of the Hill players in the game for a long time, though. 20-10, winning 2/3 of his game in this all-important set. And Buff setting up with a Mega Knight in front of his Fisherman. And a little leapfrog back and forth there. So pulling the Mega Knight into the middle and easily controlled here does Lapacati. First minute away, and Ram Rider in on the right-hand side. Cage to pick up. So far, Lapo holding strong. The cage will be solid, of course, against the Ram Rider. Log for some knockback. And guys, do bear with us. You'll be having just me for a couple of moments. Again, we are doing all of this remotely, and we've lost Andrew here for a minute, but my partner will be back on, and as soon as we can sort this one out. First 2 minutes passing, and it's been pretty slow so far. Slight lead here for the Belarusian. 2-time #1 on ladder, 7 top 3 finishes for Lapo.
Rich, I'm back.
Andrew, you're back here?
I was just floating off in space, but I'm here, and I still was able to watch the match though. So it's been a good match at least, even though I was a little stressed out.
Yeah, a little slow play here so far. Lapo mostly controlling it on defense, although we'll see how well he deals with the Mega Knight as time does go on with this big stuff behind it.
Yeah, so Mega Knight coming across here. Skeleton Dragons again, just paying dividends. That splash damage, so nice. And here we go, RG coming across the river.
It's so interesting to see the evolution of the RG meta, where it was RG Fisherman Hunter for so long, and we'll probably still see some of that, but this version of Royal Giant has become more and more popular over the last month.
Yeah, that Earthquake coming in makes this really difficult to stop. Those logs have to be timed perfectly with DPS, but it just doesn't work when that Mega Knight is tanking.
And a huge Mega Knight leap onto the right-hand side, 6:10 remaining as we go to sudden death overtime. Buffmac firmly in control here, about twice the HP on the right-hand side of his opponent.
And you see the frustration on Lapocati's face, just not able to get that damage on the tower because he wants to keep going into this right-hand lane. His opponent, though, gets massive counter pushes because of the amount of damage he has, and of course, that pesky Ram Rider.
Well, as I was mentioning when you were briefly disconnected, the difficulty here, you're going to see tower go down in just a moment. The difficulty here for Lapo is trying to control the Mega Knight on the ground with very few cards to do so. And the only really card he can really use to control that Mega Knight is the Goblin Cage.
Exactly.
But then you don't have the Goblin Cage for the Ram Rider, and that's a GG well played. Buffmac puts Tribe Gaming in the driver's seat.
You know, and sometimes in that situation, what you'll do if you're Lapocati then is to early cycle that Goblin Cage so you can get the second one down by the time the Ram Rider comes in. The problem is you can't early cycle it because your opponent has Earthquake. So Lapocati's stuck between a rock and a hard place, and Buffmac really doing a great job of punishing him for it because look at what Lapo has to tank. He's got the Brawler and the RG, and his opponent has a Fisherman, which really makes it difficult to protect either of those units.
And you really can't use the Royal Giant as the way to control that Mega Knight. So you're looking at not really a lot of great tools. The Skeletons maybe to distract for a second, but in this case, really difficult with the Mega Knight. You're going to see here how much trouble he has handling this push from Buffmac.
Yeah, because it's all about the single target DPS. Look at that. The Musketeers behind, it's still alive because they have to fireball on top of that Fisherman as well. Heal Spirit comes in, and you see that prolongs the life of the Mega Knight to basically make it so that this Ram Rider can walk to the tower.
Yeah, I mean, that Goblin Cage didn't even slow down the Ram Rider. No touch, no connection. It absolutely melted. So a tough one here for Lapocati in game number 3. And now we have Tribe Gaming up 2-1, but the only man standing for Spacestation Gaming, not a bad choice at all. The God RF coming up next.
Yeah, the God RF coming off of his sweep last week. You know he's feeling good today. You know he wants to bring home this W in 2 sets because what happens in 1v1? It has to be Samuel Basoto. How is he feeling after that first drop? Is he able to let it go? You'd think so because he is such a great ladder player. You have to imagine if you want to be that good at ladder that consistently, you can't get super tilted from a mistake.
Yeah, but there's a difference in playing ladder at home where, you know, you can take a break for a while, come back when you get reset, things like that. Of course, he is used to pushing in those final hours, so there's a kind of a balance there. But that versus you had one game, now you have to come back out potentially and play 2 or 3 more. Just a few minutes later, with maybe not the chance to reset the way you'd like.
Yeah, and you know, giving a lot of credit to the God RF here, let's talk about his journey, which is he has to take down Buffmac and Jupiter King, and then just wait and see what happens if he doesn't, because he doesn't get to play in the 1v1. It's all in the hands of, like we just said, Samuel Basoto. So RF trying to make his last showing very impactful.
Talking about RF's 2020, some of the things he's done this season. This year, number 2 on ladder, winning the Red Bull MEO USA edition, Game History Cup number 2, winning the CWA Cup, and 4th at the Brenchong Cup. So He's been on fire in head-to-head play overall throughout 2020, hoping to continue that as we go into this fall split.
Yeah, so here we go. RF cycling his Muskie in the back as soon as he sees that Lava Hound come in. Skeleton Dragon's up front, and he's got to get that Mega Minion away. Really nice Fireball.
Yeah, solid work here from RF on the defensive side. You see a bit of a head tilt from Buffmac and a small sigh.
Yeah, Buffmac maybe hoping to get a little bit more out of that than he did, but also probably seeing now that his opponent has great splash damage for the Skies, single target DPS for the Skies, and of course that Fireball to get the balloon back.
And cycling that Mega Knight to the left-hand lane. Tombstone in for a bit of control.
And I like what RF is doing here. He can really control the pace of the match because he can play on the ground, and Buffmac's going to have to respond accordingly.
Yeah, wants to has to pull that Lava Hound in front to keep the Skeleton Dragons, that high DPS on the board, so the Mega Knight does not run roughshod on the opposite side. Good Fireball in, but does leave one Skeleton Dragon on the board.
Yeah, nice Fireball there. Really nice spacing by RF as well, not allowing Buffmac to be able to get all 4 targets. The 2 Skeleton Dragons, the Musketeer, and of course, the Princess Tower.
Here we go into double elixir time. Currently, the Americans slightly ahead of the Brit. 24-44 on the left to 23-74 on the right, and those pigs run right into a set of barbs. Solid heal spirit, though, to get a little extra damage.
Yeah, and I like what RF did there. He didn't go for the immediate Fireball because he knows that Fireball is going to be really, really important for him to use, once again, to knock back that balloon. So what does he do? Now that that's out of cycle in the barbs, he goes to the ground once again, and Buffmac is forced to play in the lane that RF wants.
Trying to get that Tombstone out of the way right now. Is RF give that Mega Knight a potential path? Ooh. No, Zap takes off the Musketeer. Mega Knight completely controlled. Buffmac about to get a good shot in on the right-hand side. Nearly tied up here as we are 20 seconds away from going into sudden death.
Oh man, what a game of chess between these two guys. One selling out on moments on offense, the other on defense. Exactly like you said, he's going to get that Tombstone off the board with his Barb Barrel. This time a lot more successful than the last. How will he capitalize?
Fireball out of cycle, pigs right behind the Mega Knight. Huge push on the left-hand side. I don't know if Buffmac can do anything about it. RF all over that tower. That's going to die, though, when you have the balloon going to the right.
Yeah, and the Musketeer's out of cycle, so here we go. Skeleton Dragon's behind. Nothing there, no Fireball.
Huge balloon connection. Second drop gets in. Buffmac gonna put Space Station Gaming away in King of the Hill and send this to the 1v1.
You talk about the impact of 2 elixir in a game. So many things done correctly by Buffmac in that moment. And the biggest mistake was RF cycling that Musketeer to the left instead of the Dragons. He has the Musketeer for the right. It's more single target DPS. I don't know if it actually changes the outcome, but that zap by Buffmac in the last second to get that second drop in was huge.
An absolute gem from Buffmac, and there you have King of the Hill going to Tribe Gaming, and this makes things very, very difficult for Space Station now. You have to assume, you can't assume, you know that it's going to be Samuel on one side.
Yeah.
I was going to say to assume it's Jupiter King, but I don't care if you have Jupiter King or TNT on the opposite side. Either way, it's an absolute monster.
I know, and it really feels like they would bring out Jupiter King just because he's supposed to be their 1v1 star. This is his moment, right? They're finally in that set. They didn't make it to the 3rd set a lot last season, That was not a thing that they were used to doing. So if they're going to do it in their 2nd match of the season, let's get their star ready to go.
Just absolutely pitch perfect final sequence here from Buffmac, and that one's where he took the lead, and this is where he finishes things off. Check out the zap that's going to keep one more shot for that balloon perfectly timed, and that's tower down. And it looked for a minute like RF was going to run away with it and send us to game number 5, but picture-perfect play by Buff to get that win.
Yeah, and I loved the recognition there of Buffmac of just going, I'm not going to win this on the left-hand side. He's not going to take my tower, though, so I have to go in with the balloon. That's my last chance, last-ditch effort, and it actually pays off in kind. I mean, that was one of the best swerves that we've seen in a while against one of the best players in all of CRL.
I think that's one of the key factors to really understanding Lava Loon, right? Is when are you going Lava and Balloon in the same lane, and when is the right time to split? And that's the difference between a good Lava Loon player and a great Lava Loon player, is knowing exactly when that is and is not the right decision to make. And we saw Buffmac making that correct decision at the most important time and taking a win here. And now we're going familiar territory here between these two teams. Spacestation, Tribe Gaming going to the final all-deciding set.
Yeah, and the one other thing that Buffmac did that you don't really get to see unless you're looking really deep is the fact that he made it so RF could not fireball what he wanted. Those barbarians high at the river behind the balloon made RF choose, what do I fireball? Is it the balloon on the front end to get it off the tower, but then I don't have anything to deal with those barbs? So the spacing and the timing there by Buffmac, that's why that extra half second of hesitation came in from RF, which allowed that zap to steal the game. And that's all done by beautiful time and game management from the Tribe representative.
Look, this is the promise of this matchup, right, Andrew? I mean, 2v2 was compelling. It was interesting. You have Buff and Azealia taking some risks, not paying off. King of the Hill, back and forth, wins on both sides. And here we are going to the third and final set. And yes, it will be the two young stars, Samuel against Jupiter King.
Let's go, man. This is exactly what we want to see. Now, Samuel and Jupiter King, what's interesting about this is even though they were the head-to-head stars last season, they actually didn't ever face each other until King of the Hill in that 5th set. And they only have played once in CRL. So Samuel up 1-0 here, but a very different set in 1v1.
Here we go. Best of 3. Samuel Basoto with that loss drops his career CRL record to 14-15. So just below 50% win rate. Most of that, of course, being from his rough opening season with Fnatic back in fall of last year. Jupiter King, of course, currently at the #1 win rate of 67% career-wise, but that's through only 12 games played, 8-4 for the South Korean.
So Jupiter King not even batting an eye at the 3 cycled cards from Samuel Basoto. Finally, the Musketeer comes out as a response to the Knight.
So looking like Hog triple spell here for Samuel. Going with the Fireball version rather than the Earthquake version, and it's Lumberloon for Jupiter King.
I love that interaction there. The Heal Spirit just in time, keeps the Musketeer alive, gets the Lumberjack in front, Balloon behind, and that right there will get him just a bit of damage on the tower and the Musketeer.
This is an interesting one for Samuel to play because he has the Bomb Tower Snowball combination, which is so good at taking control of the balloon. But the Rage is the X factor here. The Lumberjack raging at that balloon, it allows hits to get in if he can't DPS that balloon down fast enough that Samuel would normally be able to protect if it weren't for the Lumberjack.
Exactly. It's exactly about that. And now you see the 6-man coming down up front. The big thing here for Samuel Basoto is he only has 1 tank on the ground, but a very fast cycle. So it's going to be a lot of moves like this, kiting with skeletons, using his spell power to prolong the life of his highest DPS dealers.
Musketeer off the board, but no damage in on that push for Jupiter King. He might put something here in front of these Skeleton Dragons. Nope, going to let them just put some pressure on the right-hand side.
Now, one thing to recognize, at least in this last sequence for me, was that it felt like Samuel kind of had to do everything right, whereas it felt like Jupiter King was able to just drop units in sequence. Does that feel kind of appropriate? Like you saw the Kite, the Log, the Snowball, the Musketeer being played offset to the left, the Knight to the right, all those things where it was just like for Jupiter King, he's like, I'm going to split my 6-man and go to the lane that Samuel doesn't commit to.
Yeah, I mean, that's where things get really, really annoying for this matchup for Samuel. It's going to be a hard one. Has to get past a lot of DPS on the board, play defense, and then still try to find a spot to get through when that Fisherman isn't available to pull the Hog Rider. So this is going to be a challenging one for the Brazilian.
Yeah, and that was the next thing to bring up was the Fisherman, the other X factor here for Jupiter King, needing to get that Hog on the King Tower for the King Tower to activate for the extra DPS, and then also, you see here, Fisherman out of cycle, so what does he do? He goes in with the Hog Rider.
Yeah, good choice there to see the Fisherman cycled into that lane, knew he'd get one shot. 1389 right now, Samuel with the lead as we go into sudden death overtime.
Very, very nice log there, a life-saving log on the left-hand side from Samuel. Now selling out on the right, but no elixir to deal with anything on the left.
Hog trying to get a lot of hits on the right-hand side. This is going to be a King Tower activation, but that's a lot of damage. But the Raged Up Balloon connects and does not get the second. 597 to 1264. Basoto holding onto the lead, but the pressure is on.
Oh my goodness, yes, it is a really, really nice sequence there from both of these players, but it does feel like Samuel Basoto is in a bit of trouble. Snowball's gonna come in, but not enough DPS down on top of that balloon.
It's the Skeleton Dragons connecting. That takes the lead, and that's going to be game number 1. Jupiter King faces adversity, comes back, and you can see the look of discomfort on Samuel's face, certainly struggling today.
Well, I mean, you know, the first thing that happened was exactly what you and I were talking about, was the
So here we go, game number 1 in the books. It seems like we might have lost Andrew there for a second as well, so we're still working to get all those bugs fixed out. Jupiter King taking the win, and this was just a tough one. We were talking about that before. I'm not sure where Andrew was going there, but the difficulty of the multi-part defense, how much elixir has to be spent on Samuel's side to keep the Lumberloon pushes off of that tower, and we saw just wasn't going to be enough, spending so much elixir on keeping the balloon off tower that he could not follow up with defense against that Skeleton Dragon push on the left-hand side. So there you go, Jupiter King taking game number 1, starting off his fall season perfect so far, and something that I think no one was questioning whether he'd be phenomenal in this 1v1 set. Samuel, though, really has to work hard to regroup. 2 rough games, 2 maybe a challenging games mentally, emotionally here for him to recover from as we go into our second game of 1v1. Andrew, have you made it back yet? Excellent.
I don't know what's going on, but what I was saying essentially was that Jupiter King waited very, very patiently the entire matchup against Samuel Basoto for him to make that one mistake or to really see that he was low on elixir, and it was just that one Lumberloon push on the left-hand side when Samuel was sold to 0 on the right that was just, that's when he capitalized.
Yeah, you see Jupiter's just a little bit ahead on elixir, and this is what you have to do. The Musketeer, the bomb tower, snowball to push that balloon back into the bomb range, but that just leaves nothing, not enough to take care of those Skeleton Dragons, and a lot of DPS comes on through, and again, that's all because of how much elixir Jupiter King, or Basoto, has to spend against defending that balloon every single time because of the Lumberjack.
And, you know, and the one other thing we actually mentioned a couple times last weekend was those Skeleton Dragons, their range and their retarget is so quick that it seems like it's happened so many times in my matches and in CRL matches where you're like, that knight was down in time. I know it was down in time. How did it not catch those dragons? But it happens all the time on ladder and grand challenges. It's happened right here in CRL. I think that's maybe where some of the frustration came in on his face. He was like, I knew they were going to come in. How did I not defend them?
Let's go jump into game number 2. Tribe Gaming with match point here. Jupiter King up 1 on Samuel. Can the Brazilian regroup and get back on track here, or will this be a quick out in the 1v1 set? So Samuel might be going with Mortar Skeleton Barrel cycle.
Yeah, it is looking like it.
Jupiter could be pretty much anything with Knight and Musketeer at this stage.
Yeah, I know. Sitting down with Razor last week on CRL Spotlight, he was talking about how basically every pro and their mothers think that the Musketeer needs a nerf. She's just so beefy. She's got such great range. She does so much damage. She really is the strongest range damage dealing card in the game.
And you see just a lot of delay there out of Jupiter King, knowing what he's up against, wanted to make sure that that Skeleton Barrel was well handled. So looked like it's going to be Graveyard Musk for Jupiter King against Samuel, running the most popular deck in the game right now.
Yeah, very, very different looks here from 2 different Mortar decks.
So the Mortar to pull the Skeleton Barrel if necessary, and of course the even trade there with the Royal Delivery. It feels like Jupiter King has a lot of ways to handle the Skeleton Barrel. The question now is, can Samuel do enough outcycling to beat him, but this Graveyard deck gets around very quickly, Andrew.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I give the matchup here to Jupiter King. It feels like he's got a lot of answers to deal with these pushes coming across the river. The Mortar there is going to pull. The Musketeer is going to help out. And then it's really about the tank. You know, there's a lot of tankage on Jupiter King's side of the map with the Knight and, of course, the Cannon Cart. It feels like Samuel's going to have a hard time getting enough DPS on the board when that Graveyard finally comes in.
And that's a nice Cannon Cart there. Going to handle the Knight, going to pull the Mortar, and you see the Musketeer going to the outside. Very well controlled here by Jupiter as we go into the final minute of regulation play. Maybe a little half-second late there on the delivery on the left-hand side. Graveyard, Poison, Musketeer connects on the right-hand side. Mortar high for Samuel, defensive Mortar in response. Musketeer has to come out to play defense on the left-hand side against a Skeleton Barrel and a Knight as well to hold on to things. So right now it's Jupiter King ahead by just a little bit, 1737 to 1845. Maybe a bit out of sorts and a bit out of cycle he was there against Samuel, who does get a Mortar connection and now is going to take the lead by about 26 HP, and here he goes switching lanes. Good control here of that Mortar one more time. Knight walking to support the Mortar for Samuel on the left-hand side. And this, there you go, Andrew. $16.44 to $17.37. Andrew, 90 seconds left. What does Samuel have to do to defend against these Graveyards here as we get closer to triple? Mortar goes to the left-hand side here. Will it connect on the left-hand side? And yes, it does. 15:53. Samuel putting the pressure on, and this seems to be the name of the game. Pressure, pressure, pressure. Trying not to let Jupiter King get an opportunity to defend, but the high Cannon Cart, the Musketeer low. I don't know if he wants to counter push into this same lane, but he does have the healthy Musketeer, and no, he goes the opposite side. Fireball, Skeletons cannot get down to protect the Muskie in time, so now it's Jupiter trying to put pressure on the right-hand side as we go to the final 45 seconds. Knight played high, and again, the Mortar down low, not using that at all to defend against these Skeleton Barrels. Musketeer will do the job high, and that will take off the Muskie. More damage here. Samuel putting on a show in the final 30 seconds.
Yeah, and my apologies, guys. I have no idea what is going on today. Spear Goblin cycled in the back, and this is actually the answer to the question you were going to ask me earlier, is how does he deal with the Graveyards? It's almost impossible because Jupiter King can hold on his poison to either get the Goblin gang that's dropped or late drop it on top of the Spear Goblins.
Spell cycle in on the left-hand side. Fireball, log, poison going in the opposite direction. Jupiter does stop the drop from the Skeleton Barrel. That's absolutely huge, and that Mortar might be what wins the game and the match for Tribe Gaming. Jupiter King starts off his fall campaign a perfect 2-0.
Yeah, and what a frustrating day for Samuel Basoda to come out. It felt like all things were going wrong for him in the beginning when he had that horrible misclick with the Graveyard against a Balloon deck. There's no coming back from that, especially in single Elixir. But then you carry it on over here into the 1v1 set, and it feels like even after the first drop of the game here in the 1v1 set, I think he was just too tilted from what had happened earlier in the match.
It certainly felt like it, and this is one of those ones that Samuel had very, very close, but it becomes a difficult prospect, right? You talk about all the different ways to defend against Graveyard with the gang, with the spears. The log is also a key piece of that Graveyard defense, but in that final fight, he has to put some DPS on that left-hand tower.
Yeah, and that becomes a really difficult thing with this deck. You know, when I was cutting in and out there, you were asking me, how do you defend against the Graveyard? And it's really difficult because the Spear Goblins and the Goblin Gang and the Musketeer are all spellable when it comes to poison. So how do you get enough pressure on the left-hand side with only a Skeleton Barrel, and how do you defend the Graveyard on the right-hand side without giving too much spell value? And the answer is you really don't that well.
And you see Samuel with the perfect drop of the Goblin Gang on defense. The Musketeer was high, the Poison went high, and he played the Goblin Gang where he had to, with the Stab Goblins in range to contend with those Skeletons and the Spear Goblins just outside of the Poison, but even then, not enough to keep the damage off, and Tribe Gaming moves to 2-0 on the season, continuing to look like a juggernaut, even after dropping the 2v2 up against a lineup like RF, Samuel, and Lapacati coming out on top.
Well, so what's really interesting about this is that the 2v2 is the thing that's not correct for SSG right now, right? It's supposed to be AC and RF, but the 2v2 was what worked best today. Lapacati did what you'd expect him to do in head-to-head. Samuel struggled a little bit, but what does this mean for Spacestation Gaming moving forward, specifically against Tribe? When their best 2v2 duo isn't really the issue, it's really more about them competing with Tribe in head-to-head.
Well, you have to think about one key factor here, is how much time RF and Lapo have had to put into working 2v2 together to get into a proper form for this level. I think there's no question that you put AC back into 2v2 next week so that Lapacati can focus on prepping for 1v1. He's not splitting his focus between those two sets, and RF doesn't have to grind 2v2 the same way with a new partner, and can also be a little bit more flexible for that King of the Hill as well.
Now, and just to play devil's advocate here a little bit, is it almost better to have Lapo in 2v2 because he's such a momentum player, and they win 2v2 so frequently that he'll come into that King of the Hill with a little bit more energy, if you will?
Maybe. I mean, look, it's an interesting question, but I think that from my perspective, the flexibility of Lapo or Samuel for the 1v1 set is critical.
Yeah.
They didn't have that flexibility today, so they were forced to put in a tilted player in 1v1. So I think there's more value there than there is in having Lapo in 2v2.
I agree. All right, guys, coming up next, don't go anywhere, CRB going up against Dignitas.
So a back and forth battle in our opening match, the thing we all wanted to see, going all the way down to the wire. All over the place, though, was that match between Tribe and SSG, and now we move on to our second match of the day, which doesn't on paper seem as evenly balanced, Andrew, as we had in our first match. It's CRL Betis, who look like they are getting better and better as time goes on, against Dignitas that just does not seem to have their act together.
Yeah, Dignitas, I feel like we've said that a lot about them, and it's tough because I like Dignitas. I like the players on Dig. They just don't seem to be able to really get the synergy that you need from a team that is going to be championship caliber. Now, that being said, Cream on the other side of it today is more important for them, in my opinion, because of what we saw last week out of them, specifically from St. Bellican in that head-to-head play, sweeping Liquid, but is Cream a top 4 competitor? Are they a top 3 competitor? Are they a team that should win the league? That is something that a lot of people are starting to talk about right now based off what they saw last week. So what do they need to do today? They need to come out and beat Dig in 2 sets. On the other side of it, for Dignitas, they just need to win. I don't care how they do it. I don't care if they go to Game 3, Game 5, and Game 3. They need to win.
Well, if they're going to win, Andrew, it's all about one player and one player specifically. That's Cody Go.
Yeah.
Cody Go, currently the only player at or above 50% career win rate for Dignitas in CRL, that win rate being 50-50. He's the only one there, put up a big King of the Hill sweep last weekend, but he's not in the 2v2, or at least he wasn't last weekend. In my opinion, you put him back in 2v2. Your thoughts on that one, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you can get your best player out there in the first 2 sets without breaking the rules, maybe that's what you need to do right now, because like you said, Cody Go was the guy for them last week. He's been the guy for them for a while, and even to new people that are joining CRL, which, you know, you and I run into all the time, I had people reach out to me this last week being like, oh man, I was just so heartbroken for Cody Go. And that's exactly what you want to hear about your players in the sense of winning over the fans in the way that they play. Now you just need to change that heartbreak into being like, oh my gosh, he did it, Digga won. That's the one thing, and I think you're right. He is the key to success for those Dignitas players.
Now, on the other side, Andrew, you and I at top of the show both said that we picked Michifu in our fantasy lineups. Only has 1 match this weekend. Why'd you go ahead with Michifu?
So my thing with Michifu is I have faith in Cream's 2v2, and I love what that kid can do in head-to-head play. I really do, and I really want to see him shine. He feels like, to me, the next best option when it comes to 1v1 on Cream. I know that might not be correct because you have people like Pedro and St. Bellican, but look, Michifu's done very, very well in the past, and I think if he's feeling good after 2v2, you bring him into at least 1 game in King of the Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no question that he plays in King of the Hill. He's a top tier talent, and a nice little bit of an addition to CRL Betis this season, especially partnered with Diego E in 2v2 and with X Pedro, who we haven't seen yet in this 1v1 set. Let's take a look at our next match.
Ok, Cream es un partido muy emocionante. Vi jugar a Código, el mejor Código que he visto hace mucho tiempo. Súper contento, soy fan de él.
This is one of those matches that they have to win. You can't afford to lose to Dignitas at this stage in the season if you're really going to make a true run at that top 4.
Agora temos CRL Betis contra Dignitas, jogo importantíssimo pra...
Não quis saber, o Egor parece que abandonou. Vitória do Bellican.
Abriu mão e o Bellican com...
Michifu and Diego E are going to take this 2v2 set with double expo, Rich.
This is bananas. This is absolutely bananas.
Partida básicamente ya para el colombiano que vino caliente y dice, Dignitas está aquí.
Razor needs to play an immaculate defense, and it's just not going to happen. St. Belkin sweeps. He's going to sweep Liquid. Sweep for Código in this King of the Hill would be massive for Dignitas. Reinvigorate them and probably reignite the flame behind them that they walked into today with before they got swept in that 2v2.
Gigante Real vai bater pra dar vitória pro Código e consegue deixar com 44 negão.
Dignitas needs to put together a playoff season. That's what I want to see out of them. That's it.
Bueno, listo, listo, lo quiero, te lo dije, mira el daño, mira el daño, mira el daño, mira el daño.
Partida. And you saw right there the key for Dig this weekend. Código, the Colombian, instrumental in his nation's run in the no-tilt worlds. Huge against SK Gaming, although they couldn't pull out the victory. And they have a tough matchup today, Andrew, against CRL Betis.
100%. Michifu and Diego E most likely to come out in that 2v2 set. St. Belkin with the 1, 2, 3 in King of the Hill over Razor, Igor, and Surgical Goblin. And of course, their star, their 1v1 phenom, ex-Pedro 15, who have yet to see this season. CRB is a force to be reckoned with here in the fall.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see if Pedro does get in the mix today. You know, he's been known to have some Wi-Fi issues, and if they had that sorted out, though, he is one of the most dangerous guys in the game. On the other side of it, Dignitas with the young player Bale, who's trying to get himself back on track here in CRL for 2020. Flash and Código, will they be the 2v2 duo once again? And Lince, the other player who I think really needs to get going for Dignitas, Andrew, if they're going to have a shot today.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, they need more than one person on their squad to get things going, and it can't just be Código every match, and I think Lince is the guy you start to lean on.
Here we go. So they are going back to Flash and Código. It just was not working last weekend with Lince and Bale as the 2v2 duo, and I think this is the right call here to put the more experienced 2v2 pair back in the opening set. Double NATO ban. By the way, guys, for 2v2, if you didn't know, and you're asking why are there 2 tornado bans? Because the bans are blind. Both teams submit their bans not knowing the other team's choice. So here we go. Tornado, the only card off the board for our opening best of 3.
All right, here we go. Michifu, Diego E, bottom of your screen. Código and Flash at the top.
Michifu's had a pretty good 2020, of course. Spent some time in the semi-pro ranks after sitting out the spring split, but stayed certainly active. Made top 8 in both the Game History Cup 2 and the AMG Cup. And 2 number 2 finishes in the No Tilt World Championship second stage, missing that third stage by 2 times in a row.
And Rich, I hate to cut you off, but if you look at the screen, there's absolute mayhem happening on both sides of the board. I don't know what Flash and Código were doing there defensively, but you got a giant skeleton bomb going off on the left-hand side and everything in the world on the right-hand side. So even though Código and Flash may be the more experienced duo, maybe they haven't been as experienced working together as of late. Wow.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Andrew. The thing that I don't like seeing here out of Dignitas is going back to Flash and Código and then running Lava Hound in game number 1. No team, and I'm talking across every roster they've had.
I know.
No team has run Lava Hound more in 2v2 than Dignitas. The Lava Hound might as well replace the owl on their logo with a Lava Hound at this point for how often they run it in 2v2.
And you hear my groans of frustration, and it's not because you bring up a point that is so valid. It's just the fact that they keep doing this. And look at it. It's getting demolished. It's getting picked apart. And I got to imagine it's because of exactly what you talk about. If you and I were going to go in a 2v2 matchup against anyone on Dignitas, we would have something to defend against Lava Hound in our deck.
Oh, we might just sell all out and run every possible Lava Hound counter there is in the game. And that'd be our only chance probably against players
I was
like
going to say, yeah, we would need to. But, I mean, if you look at it a little bit more closely, Skeleton Dragons, 2 Musketeers, Snowball, Fireball, all of this going on, you add the cage in there, and then you think about what they demand out of response from Dignitas on the ground defensively. It's just, there's just no way.
Clone comes in, pretty easily handled. And let's look at the way that the spread is working out for Cream Royale Betis. That mini P.E.K.K.A might sneak on through. This is going to be tower down on the right-hand side. I don't know if there's time, though, for this to turn into a 3-crown.
No, I really don't think so. And honestly, at that point, Michifu and Diego E, whatever, they give up a crown. I guess the Dignitas fantasy owners will be happy to at least get the crown, even though they're going to take the loss here in Game 1.
And if you picked Michi, which you and I did, that's 2 crowns to open up the weekend.
Yes,
so
sir.
nice performance there for the pair from Cream Royale Betis. And big shout out to Diego E, too, who had one of the worst win rates overall in Clash Royale League in the spring season last year at 15%. Since then, last season, a 56% win rate, and currently now 3-1 in his fall campaign.
Yeah, turn things around. Got to keep your head high. I would love to take a look at the first minute of that gameplay, or at least maybe just the first tower take to kind of see what happened leading into that. Michifu and Diego E just put a hurtin' on Código and Flash. It was as if they had a 20 elixir lead starting the game.
It was a brutal one. We'll go ahead and take a look at that replay, I believe, here in just a moment. And you see what they were going for. Código and Flash with the skeleton barrel, the clone, the flying machine, a big part of clone decks as well. Only running 1 clone in this one, lots of other spells, but in the end, it's pretty predictable.
Yeah.
You and I see, if Andrew, if you and I recognize trends enough, you have to imagine, we say this a lot, that these analysts are way ahead of us on those trends and that they're ready to counter them.
I couldn't agree more. And you look at the spell power, the spell value coming out of Dignitas and what they had on the board, it just wasn't a lot. It really wasn't. Snowball, clone, arrows, I think that was basically it in some form of a log. You can't get to the DPS dealers in the back with those spells on the board. And again, like you said, it looked like they were ready for Lava Hound. It looked like they had a plan to put it to them on the ground, and that's exactly what they did in the very beginning. A giant skeleton in one lane, a royal giant in the other lane. That's so much elixir committed to offense, and they didn't even need it on defense.
Yeah, and then you think about how much all those support troops have to focus on that giant skeleton. When it comes behind, kaboom. Pretty easy situation there for Cream Royale Betis. And it's just a tough spot for Dig. Because again, you're sitting here, if you don't win that 2v2, you have to rely on this team to win King of the Hill and 1v1. It really just feels like that's going to be a very difficult uphill battle, especially with how good Cream's lineup is.
I mean, Dignitas needs their Michael Jordan. They need that. They need their Kobe Bryant. They need their LeBron James. They need a superstar. They need someone out there that's got an almost 70% win rate, that no matter what happens, they can always keep their morale high on the squad, because you have this guy, whoever it is, that can always bring it home. Right now, it feels like everyone on their squad is almost being relied on too much to over-deliver past their potential.
Go ahead and jump into game 2, and acknowledging that the English viewers are not all just here in the US, they need their Messi, they need their Cristiano.
Yes, yes.
Let's internationalize our references a little bit. Cannon card to the right-hand side. Código and Flash changing things up here in game number 2, looking like it might be Graveyard. Could also be Ram Rider.
So nice heal spirit
You're talking
there.
about, I was going to say, to extend that analogy, Andrew, the idea of Messi, who's one of his great skill sets, isn't just scoring, but the way he sets up, puts through balls, the passes that he makes. That's one of the things a star can do, is do a great job supporting their teammates. And I think if anyone's going to be that, that's going to be Código. He really needs to elevate the play of the guys around him so they can all exceed expectations.
Well, and he did that last week. And honestly, if they would have just walked away with the win, I think we'd be saying something completely different about Dignitas today. You saw the fire, the passion, and the emotion that came out of Código, and it inspired the viewers even. So if he can inspire viewers with the loss, then imagine what he could do for his team with the win.
So it is Ram Rider for Dignitas. Little connection there on the left-hand side, 1764, as we get halfway through the opening few minutes.
Yeah, Dragon's going to connect on both sides. One alive, one dead.
And just a snowball to handle those skeleton dragons. Heal Spirit behind to get the full cleanup. But one belch does come in. So extending that lead here as we approach the final 15 before double elixir.
Yeah, I just needed to play that heal spirit a little high and to the right. Would have kited it opposite lane, but that's all right.
Talking about momentum, Andrew, Michifu is coming off of a #1 ladder finish this August, just last month. So certainly feeling the mojo right now.
Wow, that second giant skeleton coming down is going to be nice, but that first one was basically a waste of elixir because the bomb did very, very little, and their opponents were able to continue to pile on at the river.
3-3 split. Royal Giant goes to the right-hand side. Fisherman not going to be played in control. No need when you have a Ram Rider, an E-Wiz, and a pile of recruits.
Wow.
Lightning trying to make room, and the RG does get one shot.
A lot of elixir spent on that right-hand side for offense, though. How will Cody Go and Flash turn that elixir deficit from their opponents into offense on the left-hand side?
Miner into the back on that left-hand lane. Tower to get down to probably under 1,000 here. Yes, it will, because that Miner completely uncontested throughout its entire life. Full expenditure down to 869.
And that Hunter staying alive with the Ice Spirit coming in. Really, really nice DPS to clean up that Baby Dragon up high. And as you said, let that Miner set up camp.
RG gets one shot, does not get a second. There's so much stun and control, Andrew. These Royal Giants having way too much difficulty getting real work done on the right-hand side.
Yeah, and I really love what they're doing here. Ram Rider up front to see how their opponents have to sell out on defense and then support it. Usually it's the other way around, but when it's this late in the game, you know that your Ram Rider is going to get an immediate and probably over response.
Really excellent control there by Michi and Diego E to prevent that Ram Rider connection and hold off the cannon cart in conjunction. That could have been much worse, if not a tower down. As we go into the final 90, it is Dignitas way ahead, but now an opportunity as that fireball opens up a lane for the Royal Giant.
Beautiful log plus fireball, cleans everything up. However, the one thing about it that's frustrating for Cream is that their Royal Giant is distracted by something other than the tower, and it's going to happen again here, but their RG hasn't crossed the river yet.
Hunter to get down on that Royal Giant. It does take one shot, doesn't take a second shot.
Yes,
Huge
sir.
second shot here. A third one does not come in, but we are neck in neck. 53 seconds left, and just like that, Cream has the lead.
Cream has the lead. Musketeers there. A lot of spell value coming in on that right-hand tower. Does hit the tower and the E-Wiz, but also one of the recruits. Will Dig be able to close it out right now?
227 to the left-hand side, 370 on the right. Royal Giant going for it. Hunter having to go high. E was trying to control it. Not going to happen. Cream Real Betis comes out with a clean 2-0 in the 2v2.
And a beautiful high heal spirit to distract the fisherman that came down for Dignitas, allowed that Royal Giant to make its way right on through in the right-hand lane to close out this set. Man, there's few things in this game that I love as much as prediction logs and something to catch a fisherman before it's placed.
Gorgeous play by Cream. It really felt like Dig had their number in game number 2, in control most of the way through, but Michi and Diego E able to get just a couple of key connections on the right-hand side and kind of steal this one back from Dig.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough because it felt like Dignitas had to play as much defense as they did, but it really felt like their mistake came from maybe not sacrificing a little elixir or even that right-hand tower to get to the left-hand tower to make sure it went down. But I also understand that they did not want to go to a 2-tower game against Royal Giant.
So here we go, Andrew, taking a look at the replay. These were some key moments, and you see that beautiful defense to stop both the connections there on the left-hand side. That's the game saver right there from Cream.
It really is. That last-second Goblin Cage comes in. That, working with that high heal spirit, gets the Goblin Cage to stop the Ram Rider. The heal spirit soaks up the shot from the cannon shot, and then the Brawler goes to the Miner. Just a beautiful, beautiful sequence of defense by Michifu and Diego E. And there you go. There's that high heal spirit that distracts the Fisherman and the Hunter, and then it's GG, well played, Royal Giant on the right with nothing in his path.
And now Cream Real Betis up a set, up the most important 2v2 set here. And as we talked about last week, whether you're in the East or the West, the team that wins 2v2 wins over 3/4, over 3/4 of the overall matches in this league. So very, very important. And it feels like in particular this one, with Cody Go, now again the pressure on in King of the Hill, it feels like it's Cream's match to lose.
I could not agree more. Obviously, we saw it go the other way, going against the numbers this morning when we saw SSG fall after taking that 2v2 set. But I do feel like this is a bit different because of what we were speaking about at the beginning of the match, and that's all about win rate. And then you go to the beginning of the day, it's about consistency as well. And those two things are directly related. So can Dignitas really pull off the upset here? Will they prove the numbers wrong? You know, who knows? But one thing I do know, and you mentioned it earlier, Michifu, Fantasy Royale, look at that, bottom of the screen, 250,000 gold, 100 gems, and my boy, Michifu, coming through in that 2v2, and I imagine we'll probably see him in King of the Hill if he's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, the big question here is whether or not Pedro is in a situation where everything's working for him. If he is, my guess is that it's going to be Belly, Michi, and Pedro.
Yeah.
If not, we'll see Diego E mixed in there, who has been doing very, very well in head-to-head play this 2020 year overall. For Dig, what do you think? Do they play the rookie Bale or do they bench the rookie Bale here for the King of the Hill set?
You know, I think if I'm Dig, I come out and I try to rock it as best I can and get those wins early on. And I think that's exactly what Cream is looking for. So what do? They put out their home run hitter first. They don't want to give up a game. So this is going to be a big time matchup for Flash. Bale behind him, the rookie, and then Código closing things out after that great performance last weekend.
So here we go. Game number 1, King of the Hill, ex-Pedro, making his fall split debut. The Venezuelan, one of the top players in the game in head-to-head, coming off a nice early season in 2020, winning the first edition of the Bren Chong Cup back in the spring. Number 1 finish there. Huge takedown for the player.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly what you're talking about. You know, Cream looking to stop Dignitas right in their tracks. Do not let them build any momentum, and that's why they bring out Pedro first.
Graveyard for Flash. And a lot of damage early here for Pedro.
Oh, a nice bar barrel there does catch the Heal Spirit, which would have been brutal if it had landed and healed those troops. But a good job here from Pedro to go heavy on the offense when he saw an opening for his opponent to maybe pull out the Graveyard on the left-hand side when he saw the Night Ice Wiz coming down.
I think he'll do that a lot early here, Andrew, and then in the latter moments of the game, maybe early in single, he'll worry more about defense against the Graveyard on the lighter side with the Log, maybe some support behind, and there's a King Tower activation, pretty easy.
Yeah, really.
But I think later we'll see him go to that Skeleton Dragon Heal Spirit combination.
And I think you're right, and he's doing exactly what you called out here, going hyper-aggressive early on. Flash does get the nice King Tower activation and is technically up a little bit of Elixir, but probably running Graveyard, he's going to hold off for a bit.
1503, though, that's a lot of damage early on, giving up almost half of your HP on that right-hand tower. King Tower activation certainly helps, but not as significant against Royal Hogs.
And I love these plays by Flash. They're really, really small, but it's the second time in a row now where he's caught that Heal Spirit that was going to come in the last second and really, really cause him some problems. So I love that he's looking ahead and playing very, very defensive and reactive Clash Royale.
Here we go. Double Elixir time on its way. And setting up to that right-hand side is Flash, hoping to create a counter push off of what he expects to be a hog push once this Goblin Cage drops.
And this is what I was talking about in that earlier matchup. Now cycling the cage early on because there's no Earthquake in play, he can make sure to get back around to it if those hogs come in again. There it is.
Heal Spirit doesn't save that defense, but that's going to be a one-shot Ice Wiz getting taken care of fairly easily. Final 30 seconds of regulation time. Pedro's still in control. The longer this goes, though, the better it is for Flash.
Yeah, Flash just looking, waiting for his moment, and he thinks this is it. We'll see.
Good control there with the Fireball
Yeah.
to prevent any tank from crossing, take some troops off the board, and now you see at this stage going with the Skeleton Dragon Heal Spirit combination on defense against Graveyard, and it turns into a counter push. It's such a nasty combo in this matchup, Andrew.
It really, really is. The Skeleton Dragons are such frustrating cards to play against sometimes just because of how much they provide on the board defensively, but then in turn we've seen Skeleton Dragons win matches.
What a cheeky NATO there out of Flash, pulling the Musketeer in, getting her off the board, and now just getting the Poison Cycle on the right-hand side to get some chip on that tower.
Yeah, and you see right there that log coming out instantaneously to get the chip damage on the tower and keep that Ice Wiz off, because knowing that there's 90 seconds left, this could come down to a matter of HP, as we've seen so many matches in the past.
And again, same plan here, so Flash just wants the Musketeer out of contention as much as possible. This time, Skeleton Dragon's out a little early, but Pedro doing a good job of just not letting any tanks cross the bridge and making it Flash's turn to play defense.
Yeah, well, the problem here for Flash is Pedro's already recognized what he needs to do to win this match, and what he needs to do is win every battle at the bridge, and he's got way more DPS on the board than Flash.
Here we go, Baby Dragon, Ice Wiz, this is the chance. Graveyard does come in on the right-hand side. Might use the log to clean up, and he does.
Yeah, log early on, Skeleton's in the back, but the problem is those Skeletons are already piled up, and the poison is in. Look at that!
Flash takes the game. Musketeer distracted by the Baby Dragon. Such a good job of keeping tanks from crossing the bridge, but one gets across, does its job, and Flash takes that win in triple.
You feel for Pedro on that one because it was almost as if he was looking at a train coming at him for a mile. We all knew exactly when Flash was going to Graveyard. You said it, I said it, we know Pedro knew it was coming in, but the problem is he had such a great counter push, so much HP on all of his units on the board, able to drop that Graveyard in with the poison. There's no way for Pedro to defend because he had spent just too much, and Flash recognized it.
Solid win here from Flash, so keeps Dig's hopes alive for the moment, taking out a very, very critical player in this one, and it felt like Pedro did enough in the early minutes to get himself a solid lead, to give himself a good chance to win this one. But in the end, slight adjustments by Flash. Good job playing defense, not letting himself get too far behind, and here you have that big moment. One tank is all it takes to get it done.
Yeah, so the Knights up front soaking up a little bit of that damage, really about taking the Skeleton Dragons off the board. Baby Dragon crosses, nope, not tanking 4, but the poison is in. Now, you get those Royal Hogs on offense. I think that might be the biggest misplay there in this sequence.
Yeah, I mean, you understand maybe he's trying to keep some stuff from crossing the bridge, but in the end, you're spending 5 elixir to go the opposite direction when your tower is being absolutely manhandled by a pile of skeletons. So a bit off there maybe from ex-Pedro in that moment. Flash taking a very important win. So their second appearance, same as their first appearance, losing the 2v2, but coming out now in King of the Hill with an opening win. The big question now is how many wins can Flash get with Belly and Michifu up next?
Yeah, I don't know, because I will give that matchup a pretty big favor to Flash. There was just so much control for those Royal Hogs, whether it was with the cage or the NATO or the Ice was just slowing them down, and those all turning into counter pushes. So we'll see how his matchup fares against St. Bellican here in the second game of King of the Hill.
Belly cycles that snowball to the left-hand side. And we'll see if he is going pretty high cycle here, pretty fast cycle in his first appearance today, coming off that King of the Hill sweep. Somewhat controversial King of the Hill sweep from last weekend.
Yeah, somewhat.
And looks like it's going to be Minor Loon with Giant Skeleton here for the British Bomber. EU is down in the back, and Fisherman does get distracted by the Goblin Cage. Good high cage here from Flash.
Really nice high cage there, but tank on a cage already could spell trouble for Flash.
The balloon does get one connection, and that Fisherman, when the cage popped, turned right to the E-Wiz and pulled it away. So huge opening there. Belly putting together a nice one.
Yeah, that double death damage, perfect, and I think Flash thought maybe 1 step ahead, but not 5 steps ahead, and all of a sudden that Fisherman getting pulled in became a problem as opposed to something that was supposed to be a nice defensive play.
Bellican does have a top 10 career win rate in CRL overall at 59%, 23 and 16.
And Miner to the back now, recognizing that he doesn't have to worry about the King Tower activation, and knows that that E-Wiz will come in, so look at that spell value from Belly once again.
Pretty great control here at this stage. Going into the final minute, double elixir time of regulation play. Bellican up by a mile right now, has not taken a lick of damage yet on either tower.
And kind of surprising to see Flash cycle the Hunter so early on, just because it is his best response to the balloon, but maybe feeling pretty confident that he can get back around.
Well, E-Wiz Cage also can do some work, but this Graveyard push on the right-hand side, getting some significant damage, but maybe not as much as he would have liked, and now a second Giant Skeleton down, and this should be nicely controlled here by Belly.
Yeah. Yeah, Belly getting that second Giant Skeleton down. Going to probably go in with the Balloon, which is why you get that high Knight out of Código, followed with the Hunter. This should be an easy defense.
Giant Skeleton will clean all of that up, and you're going to see, I believe this is going to be the story for Belican now, is pressure with the Balloon and Giant Skeleton, but get most of that damage from the Miner.
And I honestly think the leaked elixir here is speaking a lot to the kind of the flow of the match. Flash is playing a bit uncomfortable this entire match, trying to find the correct moments when to cycle his cards and where to cycle them, because he cannot carelessly cycle 3 of his cards. 3 of his cards in the Hunter, Ewiz, and Cage are so important for every one of these balloon pushes.
And Ewiz goes to the right-hand side. Looks like maybe it's an attempt at a steal here. I don't know if that's going to work. Balloon gets in. Belican takes the second game of King of the Hill and sends Flash back to the board.
You know, you like the idea there. You saw that Flash almost had an opening. There's a ton on Belican's bottom right tower, but also, as you said, with that Ewiz being cycled to the right, there was nothing to stop that Balloon coming in. There's no way he's going to get 100 down and Cage down in order to take out all the tanks in front of the Balloon as well.
So Belly moves his record this season in King of the Hill to 4-0. We saw TNT do the same thing earlier today, although he ended up losing his next game. And it was just difficult. Too much damage early on given up by Flash to recover. And you saw the Graveyard doing good damage at the end, but it seemed like the entire time Flash was playing desperate to get damage rather than waiting for a good opportunity to actually put the damage on tower.
Well, what's pretty interesting about this matchup is you see that there's not a lot of ways for Belican to actually clean up the Graveyard. But the problem is that there's so much offense coming out. Flash never had enough elixir to drop a Graveyard that was being supported.
Giant Skeleton you can see here on the left-hand side, and this is that push. You see the Ewiz go to the right, the Baby Dragon trying to get across and tank in time, but not enough here to stop. The Cage holds on for a second. That second doesn't matter. And you see what he was going for there, Flash, trying to buy enough time for a tower race. But the Goblin Cage just disappears like that. GG, well played. Flash goes back to the bench.
Yeah, and if he makes that decision a little bit earlier in the match, then maybe we go to a 2-tower game, because Belican did not play that defense great. He fireballed too high, pushed the Baby Dragon forward. Baby Dragon was on tower and tanking. There was a lot going wrong for Belican. There just was not enough time for Dignitas and Flash. So Belly stays perfect through 2 weeks. How's he going to do here against his next opponent?
Well, this is a guy he's played against a lot in Bale. When Belican was taking time away from CRL to focus on finishing up high school, he faced a lot against Bale in the Orange Crown League, who was one of the top players in OCL overall. Of course, that transition to CRL has been a little bit more bumpy than his domination in that Spanish semi-pro league, but here we go. Let's jump into game number 2 and see if he can fare better against a guy that he knows pretty well.
The OCL matchup. Bale, the rookie, on the right. Belican, I guess at this point, a veteran on the left.
Well, let's not forget that he is a league champion with Team Queso from back in that fall 2018 split. A dominating Team Queso, and it's going to be Mortar Skeleton Barrel for St. Belican. Obviously, Pigs for Bale.
Yeah, and right off the bat, I probably give this matchup to Belly. He should be able to control this match pretty well, especially when it gets into double elixir time. His cycle can keep up. He can keep mortars on the board. He's got a lot of ways to get damage on top of the hogs, and of course, keep that musketeer, that pesky musketeer, at bay.
Good job with getting some DPS on that mortar quickly, but this is a nice creative play here from Belican using the Skeleton Barrel defensively. Perfectly defensively against those Skeleton Dragons. Bale, though, up by 1 elixir as we go towards the midway point of regulation.
Now, Skeleton Dragons, very, very strong. Skeleton Barrel, though, one of my favorite cards in the game. I just love the interactions, and I love the ability to kind of throw your opponent off their timing defensively with it.
2-2 split for Bale. Fireball in. Musketeer goes away. A little extra chip damage for Belican on the left-hand side. You see Bale kind of scratch his chin there for a second.
Yeah, Bale probably thinking, all right, Fireball's out of cycle. How do I punish him with the hogs? Well, he's probably expecting me to punish him with the hogs, so maybe I built a push starting from the back. And there it is.
Bale was the 6-time Orange Crown League MVP earlier on in this year, back into 2019. 32-10 overall win rate, and he's done well in a lot of those tournaments. Moreno Cup, Cabrera Cup, Game History Cup, all placing high in the bracket rounds, but has not turned it into success yet here. And you feel like it's mostly got to be nerves.
Yeah, I mean, nerves are huge. We heard a lot of the rookies talk about it last weekend, and we saw, things kind of turn around for Pain Gaming, but nerves are very, very real. Even when you're playing it at the comfort of your own home, there's still the fact that there's so much expected out of you and so much on the line.
Final 30 seconds of regulation. Musketeer high to try to get on that Mortar. Fireball working the opposite direction. Mortar will take the Muskie off the board, but will not get a shot. Pigs in for Bale.
Yeah, and look at that. The Goblin Gang, the same defense a couple times in a row, now goes high with the Mortar. Mortar going to demand a response here, but really the 6-man making it very, very difficult for Belican to make his Mortar effective offensively.
And somehow a pig gets on tower after all of that. 15:45 remains as we go into sudden death overtime. It's Bale with the lead.
Yeah, Bale with the lead here, and once again, can't Mortar effectively against this 6-man. It's really frustrating.
Fireball into the right-hand side. Doesn't get the Musketeer for Bale.
Yeah, frustrating moment for him. Not going to really be a game changer, but maybe in the sense of throwing the lead that he had away by that.
Bar Barrel still in cycle, even though the Fireball did some good work on the front end. Things fairly close here. That Fireball will extend the lead, but Belly not out of it.
No, not yet at all. Probably going to go back on offense here, but Bale's going to be waiting for it. Belican might want to just let this die on the vine.
Mortar high inside, and it does not get a shot. Musketeer down just in time.
I'll be honest, Belican playing that Mortar where he did, I'm surprised that if he was going to drop the Skeleton Barrel as his second card, which he did, why he didn't play it higher and on top of his Mortar, looking for the Dragons or the Musketeer.
Well, you talked about variation. We'll see if maybe he goes for the same move again, but changes up the way he supports it. Fireball in on the Musketeer, 1,300. With that, Belican does have the lead, but there's a ton coming downhill, Andrew.
Yes, there is. Mortar is back down, but the Fireball's going to clean everything up. That is trouble for St. Belican.
Pig in on the left-hand side. Musketeer still hanging on. No King Tower activation. Belly went for it, couldn't get it done, and that might be the death knell.
A really, really nice kite there with the Skeleton Barrel. Belican's still hanging on by just a hair. Now he's forced to Fireball defensively, I believe. Is he going to go for it on offense?
Skeleton Barrel in, trying to get away with this one. Not going to happen. Bale holds on, gets the win in game number 3, and puts Dignitas back in the lead in King of the Hill.
Really, really well played there by Bale, and I gave Belican the edge early on until that 6-man came into play, and you saw that Bale did the correct thing numerous times. There was even a moment there where it was the moment where you talked about him kind of tilting his head and thinking. It was when that Fireball got baited out from Belican. He called his bluff, and then instead of going in with the Royal Hogs, which would have been eaten alive by Bella, he goes and he starts stacking the 6-man in the back, and then he cycled that for the rest of the game. All of a sudden, Belican's Mortar became basically ineffective, and that's how Bale steals it.
Yeah, and you saw that the one high Mortar, you talked about maybe playing the Skeleton Barrel there to defend against the Musketeer. And Belly would have loved to do it again, but he never had an opportunity to get the Mortar there when it wasn't already clogged up.
Because he had to keep playing it low, and here you see him rapidly cycling the Mortar up high into all of that. Mortar's my favorite card in the game. It's my favorite win condition in the game. It is not a tank. You cannot drop it that high up into that many units, which is why, again, I think he really should have supported that Mortar when he had the Elixir with the Skeleton Barrel, because his opponent always dropped something right on top of it. That was his moment to maybe create a little bit of space, but really well played by Bale.
And a little note for you watching at home, we noted earlier today some of the errors on Pain for starting a game early without the administrator's instructions and a penalty. Dignitas has been issued a warning for starting their game early. So it doesn't happen to you the first time. Pain did 4 of them, but here you have the rookie Bale maybe making a rookie mistake, a little jumpy getting into that game. So Dig now does have a warning. Another one will result in a penalty.
Yeah, and not to just go in on this, but guys, this is the big leagues. This is CRL. Giving up sets games and matches is unforgivable, especially for teams like Pain and Dig that are really working hard to be a bubble team. If they're top 1, top 2 teams, if Tribe makes that mistake, I'm really not that worried. I'm really not. I think they'll still probably make it into that top 6. But for these types of squads that are really battling early on, you gotta have that mental fortitude. And it really, again, comes down to the coaching.
Got to keep these guys dialed in, but you understand why maybe Bale is a little bit nervous, a little bit jumpy so far. Pretty rough go throughout his CRL career. Came into today with a 22% lifetime win rate in Clash Royale League. So hoping to get some more in. A big win here was huge for him, and a win over Michifu might be massive for the young player's confidence.
Yeah, big for our fantasy team. Wait, what are we talking about? Oh, wait, Michifu, yeah, he's in now, ready to win for us. No, I honestly love what Bale did here. I think getting that win is massive, and getting it over someone who, St. Belican, who had such an outstanding performance last weekend, really, I think, builds some confidence for this young guy, really lets him know he does belong here. 22% win rate does not reflect his true talent.
Here we go. Let's jump into the 4th game of King of the Hill, Michifu for Cream Royale Betis coming out against the young man Bale. And we have not seen a ton of Barb Hut this season, Andrew. It was absolutely controlling the meta back in August, and we have not seen much of it so far here in the fall split.
No, and I'm totally okay with it. Honestly, it is one of the more frustrating cards to see your opponent play, just because of how much it can overwhelm you when you get into double and triple elixir time. And honestly, when you make mistakes in single elixir defending, you might find yourself down 3 or 4 elixir all of a sudden when you've only been playing for 30 or 40 seconds.
So Michi coming out with the not often seen Tesla, of course known as a top tier Expo player. The miner makes it 99% unlikely we're going to see an Expo here, but certainly does know the mechanics of the entire deck, including how to play Tesla in a wide variety of ways.
Yeah, so this is a lot coming down. You know that the log is somewhere in cycle. There it is, but so much spent already by Michifu, and now Bale knows this is going to be a tower down for him.
Yeah, all over the tower. The Tesla not doing much to hold on, and Michi going with Miner Cycle here against Bale, and Miner Cycle just isn't that strong right now. It really isn't. A bit of a surprising deck choice here, maybe a bit overconfident, the Spaniard.
You know, there was a minute there where we saw that Miner, Prince, Spear Goblin, Poison deck that worked for like a week. I believe it was in the spring, or maybe it was last fall. But the problem is you have to play perfect. You cannot make mistakes with a deck like this. And he made the smallest mistake of cycling his Tesla early. That was it. Cycling an early single elixir against this deck, and Bale just put the pressure on that also, and the poison that came in on top of the Musketeer plus the Barb Hut found himself down 3 or 4 elixir, just as I was saying.
Final minute, going to be very, very difficult, nay, impossible for Michifu to come back in this one, but doing his best to battle. And so it looks like we're going to go to the 3rd and final set, go to the 1v1. And the question's going to be, is it going to be Belican or ex-Pedro? Probably Pedro coming out in that 1v1 set.
I would think it's going to be Pedro unless there's something going on behind the scenes that you and I don't know about. But as of right now, it does feel like Dignitas needs to come out with whoever's feeling the hottest, because they're most likely going to go up against ex-Pedro 15.
Well, on one hand, you have Bale, who's coming out with 2 clean wins in this King of the Hill. On the other hand, you have Lindsay, who hasn't burned decks yet. Yeah. So it's kind of a challenging choice from a coaching perspective.
You know, and I'll be honest, even though Lindsay has the experience, I think I keep riding Bale. These plays that he made were really, really nice. And look at this, he's gonna actually he doesn't take the 2 crown. Really smart play there from Michifu. And you see there a little bit of smile on his face, knowing, look, I may have not won the war, but I won the battle. And that was keeping that Princess Tower alive with 8 HP.
Well, you know, you talk about all the different tiebreakers that come in after overall wins and losses and matches, then the head-to-head, then we have our sets and our games. It's come down to crowns before.
Yep.
It could come down to crowns. So not giving up that one, smart veteran move there by Michi.
And here's the thing also to look kind of at this deck under a microscope. We know what he's looking for with this Miner Chip, you know, poison control deck. But if you look at what he's playing against with the RG, the Fisherman, and the Lightning, it becomes almost impossible to take all or manage all of that. Michifu does not have enough going on in his deck to manage this much firepower, and then you throw the Barb Hut on top of that to maybe bait out the poison. It's just tough, man. It's just a really, really unforgiving matchup.
And you see how much elixir Bale has on the board compared to Michifu, who's basically in a desert with a canteen that he already ran out of water. And here you go, tower down, pretty easy opening moments there for Bale. And Andrew, you know, I said this before the match started, Dignitas needed someone to win 2 games in King of the Hill. And today that was Bale. Huge, huge key. One player didn't need to get 3, just needed 2. Bale came through, and now they have a shot. But will this play out just like last week where they make it to that third and final set and can't get it done?
I mean, that's been the problem with Dignitas. That's kind of been the story of them, is they've been able to put it together in part of the match. Just part of it. That's always been their story. They come out and they look really great in one set, maybe, but it's about getting that second set in. This is a big, big moment for them because honestly, right now, this does feel like a straight up even 50-50 because of the confidence behind Dignitas, staying alive, playing well in King of the Hill with numerous players, and then what they just did to Cream and what they saw out of Cream's head-to-head guys. I'd feel pretty confident if I was Dignitas going into this 1v1 set.
Yeah, you have to feel pretty good about it. Of course, we don't know who they're bringing out yet. We'll have that information in just a minute. You don't have Michifu available.
Yep.
Despite his because he was in the 2v2 set, so it's going to be St. Belkin, going to be ex-Pedro. My guess here is you bring out the Venezuelan.
Yeah, I think you bring out Pedro, and I think you bring out Bale. That's probably what I go with. Then again, I'm not the coach of Dignitas, but I liked what I saw out of Bale. I liked the different deck choices, and I liked the decisions he made. It didn't feel like he stole games. It felt like he controlled them.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. Bale, you know, again, you talk about nerves. His first match this weekend, or this season, was in 2v2, a set that he's not known for playing. He wasn't a 2v2 specialist back in OCL. That was an only head-to-head gameplay league. He's been a head-to-head guy for a long time, was brought in to be a head-to-head guy on this Clash Royale Betis roster. And here we go, sending him back out one more time in probably the biggest spot he's been in so far, a 1v1 set against Pedro to decide the match.
Yeah, this is massive. This is where you start to make a name for yourself. And yeah, it's not Surgical Goblin, but it's still Pedro 15, who is an incredible, incredible opponent. So this is a moment for Bale to really start to make a name for himself here in the West.
Here we go, game number 1 of this best of 3. Ex-Pedro, personal best on ladder, 83-49, and of course, has been phenomenal throughout competitive play, getting the MVP, Most Valuable Player Award for CR Nations back in 2018, representing Venezuela.
Every time I've seen Pedro play, he's impressed me. Other than, let's say, today, because he didn't have a great match, but every other time I've seen that young man compete, he's always kind of been jaw-dropping.
Well, he's a talented guy. We should have seen him in CRL West last year, but wasn't able to do it. Got into the fall split for CRL Asia with Kick's team alongside IMJP last year, where he had some pretty big-time wins. And it's great to finally see him this 2020 season here in the West, where he should be.
Yeah, big fireball there from Bale. I don't actually think it was a great fireball because he could have maybe decided to defend a little bit differently that would have demanded a counter push out of his opponent, but still obviously doing fine on elixir and damage.
So pretty slow play so far. No one has put down significant damage. Poison for Pedro, taking care of the flying machine on the right-hand side.
And a really, really nice poison there because you see the barb barrel come out. Now that barb is negligible, and he gets a little bit of damage on the tower. Gets both those units out of cycle.
Skeleton Dragons both directions. Here we go into the final 20 seconds before double elixir time. Pedro cycling Musketeer to the right-hand side. And a Night Witch in response.
Night Witch. One of the more frustrating cards to play against. She can be so easily managed, but every now and then, she is just a menace.
I want to point out, Andrew, we've seen 3 different Lava variants today. We've seen Lava Loon Minor with the arrows and zap. We've seen a more traditional or old school version of Lava Loon, and here we're seeing Lava Minor, what would look like a clone deck in a lot of ways with the Night Witch and the Flying Machine, but instead a Lava Minor variant.
Yeah, and you know, the idea behind this deck is you look at all the units on the board that you can get spell value from, and you want to spread them out. See right there, the Flying Machine a little too close to the Skeleton Dragons, all of them getting cut in that poison, and that is not what you want if you're Bale. You want to make sure that it's only one or the other.
Good high Lava Hound to protect and tank against that Musketeer, and now a lot of pressure on the right-hand side. This Flying Machine should be controlled. And there you go. Cage does come down for Pedro.
Yeah, so this is the moment for Bale to get that Lava Hound back down in the back of his map, but first has to play defense.
Graveyard in on the right-hand side. Brawler tanking for the moment. Barbarrel Skeleton Dragons in response on the GY. A slight lead, 11 HP right now for the Cream Royale Betis player.
And I love that poison. That is a really, really nice poison. Taking care of everything about to cross the river. Now getting something on top of that Flying Machine. Skeleton Dragons high, though. This could be trouble.
Way behind. This is a lot, Andrew. The Heal Spirit trying to hold off, but that's going to be a ton of damage. And the second time today, we see a Knight come down late against Skeleton Dragons. Bale taking game number 1 off Pedro.
I'm telling you, man, that late drop on the Skeleton Dragons has spelled a problem for so many pros just in the first 2 weeks of match play. It is astounding.
Great moment there for Bale, who takes the lead, and now after it looked like Dignitas was dead in the water in this one, after that 2v2 blowout, now 1 win away, match point for the Yellow Owls.
Yeah, this is just a great showing from Bale here. You talk about that win rate again, I want to keep bringing it up because 22% does not speak to how he has been playing today. He is now 3-0 and on a run here against Cream, and Pedro gonna have to put it together here in the final game. This is match point for the rest of the day. Dig.
Well, you know, Andrew, we talk about sample size being an issue with these win rates, and with the 3 wins today, Bale's career win rate in CRL has jumped from 22% to 42%. So 1 more win would put him at 6-7, almost 50-50. So, you know, it's hard to take that shortened season and debut for Bale. You gotta take it with a grain of salt. The question there was how much of it was nerves and pressure with how short that season is, starting to be a little bit more loose here potentially in this second outing.
You know, this is one of the moments where I'd kind of love to sit down and pick the mind of a pro. Obviously, the pressure here from Bale made it near impossible for Pedro to get any sort of pressure on the right-hand lane. But I know, and you know, that playing this Graveyard deck into the deck he's playing against from Bale, it's not gonna work out. There's just too much to respond to on the back end, and then you've got a massive counter push each and every time you decide to go in with your win condition. So I say this all the time in these matchups, you know, how is there a way to get opposite lane pressure up? And a lot of times their opponents don't let them, but I think that was the only way that Pedro would have been able to kind of at least temper the heat coming from the right-hand lane.
Well, again, we talked about the Skeleton Dragons sneaking on through there again. You saw how much Elixir Pedro was down there. Playing the heal, had to play the Heal Spirit to prevent some of that damage from the Lava Pups, and then leaving not enough for the Knight to get down in time for those Skeleton Dragons. So a big part of that, and a big part of playing against Graveyard a lot, is pressure. The pressure here too much, not giving Pedro room to breathe in game number 1.
So here we go. Match point for Dignitas. Bale looking to close things out.
Looking like Pedro going with Mortar Skeleton Barrel in this game number 2. Bale may be going back to Graveyard one more time.
And if he is, that is going to be a tough spot for Pedro to be in.
Lightning.
Ooh.
So looking like it might be Royal Giant instead. Could be Golem, but feels like more Royal Giant with the Musketeer.
And Heal Spirit going to come in and help clean up those skeletons just a bit. Fisherman up high.
Lightning's a really frustrating card for Pedro to deal with here because his primary DPS unit, Musketeer, goes bye-bye at not an insignificant trade, right? It's -2 for Bale, but that's only if the Musketeer is the only troop he's getting off the board. So a very frustrating one for Pedro to see here.
You know, there was the Valkyrie Musketeer Mortar Poison deck, and now there's this, you know, Mortar Musketeer, you know, bait deck. Lightning is always frustrating to go up against, and so is Barb Hut, because now you have a card that doesn't really ever allow your Mortar to go on offense, because if your mortar has ever played and it's in cycle. It just meets it in the middle, as we're seeing right now. And then, as you just said, how on earth do you get good utility out of your Musketeer when Lightning is in play?
Yeah, it's going to be really, really difficult for Pedro. And you see that Bale has so many different ways to deal with the Skeleton Barrel. The big question here is how much of an advantage can Pedro get early? Can he get ahead enough early on with those Skeleton Barrel drops, even though he's not going to get a lot of skeleton damage to make things difficult? And you see there, not the Skeleton Barrel that Pedro wanted in that situation.
You know, Rich, I'd say that it would have been a better chance for Pedro if he had run Miner in this deck, just because he would have had some ability to demand a response for tower damage. He basically has no way to get damage on the tower other than a log or fireball, because I can't imagine Bale is going to allow him to get those Skeleton Barrels anywhere near his Princess Tower.
No elixir right now for the Lightning. We'll see if Bale does pull it here, does have a 3-part target, and he does. Royal Giant gets one shot on the left.
It hurts my soul to watch this because I just know exactly how it's going to end up. Unless Pedro does something incredible, right now Bale is just slowly chipping away with a massive spell.
Good protection here of the Musketeer, Knight in front, and Pedro now starting to load up.
Ooh.
Bale may be playing a little bit of desperation defense in this moment.
Yeah, this is trouble. That was a massive negative trade there. However, once again, if you look what's on the board, because of how frustrating the Barb Hut is with dropping those Barbarians when it goes down, that even slight elixir lead that Pedro had gets eaten up in a second.
Musketeer cycled in the back for Pedro, Lightning back in cycle, and of course, needs to make some room, and there you go. Happy to make that trade right now is Bale.
He's going to keep doing it over and over and over until he recognizes that he's too far behind, and I just don't see that happening anytime soon.
Pedro is kind of committed to this lane now, and you see, knowing that right now is Bale, I wonder if Pedro maybe throws a Skeleton Barrel opposite lane just to force some elixir expenditure that direction.
It could be a good idea just to get that Barb Barrel out of cycle, and then he can go in with, you see, all this bait stuff. But again, the problem is that Barbarian Hut soaking up those barrels.
RG in the back, and this is looking ominous right now for Pedro and for Cream Royale Betis, setting up the mortar low, trying to spread this defense out as much as humanly possible. And a good pickup there against the Fisherman with the spear goblins.
And a really, really nice high Musketeer there to get as much DPS as they could in. Oh my gosh, another high Barb Hut. And Pedro may be able to steal this from Bale.
Pedro's playing a brilliant game right now. The control, keeping the Musketeer, that's the longest we've seen a Muskie on board all day. And that mortar sticking around long enough to distract a second Royal Giant.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge defensive sequence for the Venezuelan.
And these Musketeers stacking up at the river now, demanding the Lightning out up high, but that's not getting any damage in on his tower. Pedro winning the cycle game.
Oh, you did not want that Baby Dragon shot on that left-hand tower. Fireball in. Skeleton's not going to get damage. 435. It's going to come down to one Royal Giant and how it's defended. Bale, not enough time to do it. Pedro playing a beautiful game here in Triple Elixir, taking a big win and sending us to the third and final.
I mean, Pedro recognizing that the biggest problem he was going to have was on the back end. So what did he do? Pile everything down at the river because his opponent cannot get good spell value there. And he just kept winning those bridge battles over and over and over so that naked Royal Giant would cross and just get eaten alive by all the DPS coming out from Pedro.
Just really, really great gameplay from Pedro overall. Bale has to be frustrated. Really felt like he had a good spot, but a lot of it was the early damage put in by the Venezuelan, right? You saw Bale happy to eat a couple of those Skeleton Barrel drops and clean up with the Barb Barrel, but those drops add up the more those happen in single.
Yeah, so here we go. A really back and forth day this Saturday match day, whether it was SSG and Tribe. Now it's Cream and Dig going to the final match of 1v1. Winner takes all. It's basically 0-0 right now.
Yeah, it's a 0-0 BO1 to see who wins. That's a huge one. And I can't wait to go look at some of this replay action because, again, it's this one mortar defended 2 Royal Giants. You get that much value out of 4 Elixir at this stage in the game, it's a complete game changer.
Well, the beautiful thing, too, was when Pedro started to really load up at the river with Knight plus Bait. Knight plus Goblin Gang plus Barrel up front after the Lightning's out of cycle. and all of a sudden you started to see Bale having to play a 7 elixir building as his best defense at the river, and that is a big time problem for anybody.
So we're gonna have a timeout called here by one of the coaches to go over decks and maybe make the best choice they can, take a look at their analysis as we go into the third and final game. And I'm looking at what you have from Pedro, right? If I'm Pedro and I'm Cream Royale Betis, I'm giving him some deck that he can outplay a bad matchup with, and I'm expecting that Dignitas goes to something heavy in the hands of Bale.
Exactly. If I am Cream, I go with the deck with the most favorable matchups out there, period. One with very high outplayability, just like you're talking about, without a huge weakness. It's really important probably to have a building in there, maybe something like a poison, because RGs, Royal Hogs, and Graveyards are all so popular right now. But if those are all being defended against, how do you get enough offense on the board? And that will be the puzzle piece for Cream to find. You're right. That's exactly what Pedro needs to do, because he is better than Bale. That's what he expects. That's what he thinks about himself. That's what everyone else thinks. So like you said, a deck with very high outplayability, and then on the other side of it, if that's the type of deck you know your opponent's going to run, like you said, Bale goes big, heavy beatdown. One wrong defense, as you saw, like Michifu, is going to cost the entire game. So I think that's a beautiful call by you. Now we just have to see if they follow suit.
I'm really hoping that I'm wrong here, because if I'm making this call, I believe that Cream will make the same call as well. I would not be shocked to see Bale go Eagle and Battle Healer here. He's played it a lot in the past. It was popular in OCL. I would not be shocked to see him do it here, and I wouldn't be surprised to see if Cream Royale Betis runs a deck that has counter to that specific deck.
Yeah, I mean, could just be a graveyard deck. Could just be a traditional graveyard deck with Bomb Tower in there. Bomb Tower plus Poison, Ice Wiz, and NATO to clean all that splash up. Gives you massive positive elixir trades to then, in kind, put down a offensive graveyard for 7 elixir in the opposite lane with a barrel plus, obviously, the graveyard. Maybe that's the plan. Who knows?
It's possible. It's possible he goes Goblin Giant Sparky, or even with the Giant Sparky NATO deck that's really popular right now. I think it's Agony King plays that on ladder a whole lot right now. So you have two possibilities. Again, I think that he goes something that's simple to play, that doesn't have a lot of chances for small micro mistakes, that creates a big downhill push. That's my guess out of Bale in this situation, and we'll find out in a minute, because timeout is over, and it's time for these two players to see who can put up, who can shut up.
Yeah, those analysts really earning their bucks right now, picking the decks. We'll see who comes out on top. Pedro ready to go. Bale going to accept that request in just a second. Just to remind you guys where we're at, if you look at the left side of the screen, it's been a very back and forth battle, and it's all coming down to this.
Here we go, game number 3, 1v1, best of 1 for your team to take a big-time win or a big-time L. And Bale, starting with the Heal Spirit, could be, I don't know, any of 57 different decks.
And obviously, in case you guys aren't sure, Cream CRB did start off 1-0. Dignitas 0-1 on the season. Really trying to stay out of that 0-2.
So Lava Hound for Pedro. A bit surprising to go something a little bit faster here, but
yeah,
we'll see which variation he goes with in this situation.
See Bale
and Baby Dragon
there.
Bale's just sitting back and waiting. Graveyard for Bale.
Nice defensive poison there. So they basically did the exact opposite of what we called. So maybe it was that they looked at that very first layer like we did, and then the analysts come in and go, "There, that's too easy. Let's look a little bit deeper," and they end up with the opposite matchup.
Defensive Miner, Heal Spirits both directions, forcing Pedro to put the Goblin Cage out to prevent that Musketeer damage on the left-hand tower. I would love to see the face cam of Pedro if we could have got one. But, just making sure he's able to play the game effectively.
Yeah, and I think the reason you're saying that is that he would have probably shown a bit of frustration there with a massive elixir deficit. But his opponent, because of the win condition he's running, he can't just go crazy. He has to wait for the Musketeer to get in position before he can drop that Knight.
Night Witch and Heal Spirit working on defense, so Bar Barrel goes all the way across. Shocker here. Pretty close on both sides, 2006 to 1924 as we approach double.
Yeah, and even though Pedro ended up taking more damage out of that, I actually feel like he's the one that won that exchange.
And one bat bite puts this one very close, 15 HP separating these two. And again, the Lava Hound coming out to tank as the baby dragon of Bale crosses the bridge.
Yeah, perfect timing on that Lava Hound, knowing that his opponent most likely would not go with the graveyard yet. And now we get a Miner trying to get to the Musketeer, but misses everything, goes to the tower.
Yeah, that was an interesting placement with the Miner. You know, you're wondering if the Miner was going for the Musketeer, and the Knight, of course, came to the back end to defend pretty well. Doesn't get the Muskie off, and now you have two on the board for Bale.
Yeah, this is trouble here for Pedro. That is a massive push coming across the river with a lot of DPS.
Cage goes high. Night Witch Heal Spirit on defense against this graveyard, but a ton of damage in. Now down to 7-10. Bale in a huge lead as we approach sudden death.
A truly excellent Heal Spirit came in there for Bale to keep that baby dragon alive. Of course, keeping one of those Musketeers on the board and having double Musketeer across the river is going to eat any defense you have, and that's exactly what happened to Pedro's Goblin Cage.
The Cage doing a good enough job here to keep the tanks across most of the time, but Night Witch takes a walk back, Baby Dragon splash damage, and that's going to be it. Bale clutches up. Dignitas takes the upset win in their second match of the season.
Wow, I mean, great performances from Dignitas' Bale and Codigo through 2 weeks. Last weekend, it didn't pay off. They didn't come out on top by just a hair, and now Dignitas with a reinvigorated fire behind them in this young man.
I'm really kind of surprised that Pedro went with a slow beatdown archetype for this one. I guess Lava Miner isn't as slow as some other Lava decks might be, but still, I'm a bit surprised that Pedro did not go for something that had more of an outplay potential.
Yeah, I'm really curious if that whole conversation kind of went on behind the scenes during that timeout that you and I were having, and then they took it that extra layer, but it really paid off for Bale and not Pedro, because honestly, Rich, we did say that Bale would probably play some variation of Lava Hound, and that in response, Pedro may go Graveyard. But again, that extra little layer switches that matchup around and gives Dignitas the win.
And what a huge turnaround for Bale today. A 4-1 performance overall on the day. This is what Dig hired him for.
Yeah.
They cycled so many players in the spring of 2020 before we actually got to CRL. They were trying out players from all over the globe as their fourth, and they finally settled on Bale. This is why they brought him in, was to win head-to-head games, and today he pays off that promise.
Yeah, and I really like watching him play. I really do. So there you go. Dignitas, Bale, Flash, Codigo, and Lindsay taking the win today. And when I say that I love to watch him play, I really like to see the gears kind of turn inside of a pro's mind. And Bale he's a guy that you see numerous times in the match. He'll just kind of stop and think, kind of the same way that we used to love watching, oh my gosh, why am I forgetting?
Luke Dubs.
Luke Dubs, I was like, I know it's not Lindsay. Luke Dubs used to always do that, except for he would kind of stare off. But you saw today Bale taking a lot of calculated moves that ended up taking down one of the best head-to-head players in all of CRL in a great BO3.
Well, the big difference here, Andrew, I have to think was nerves. I have to think it was taking a breath, taking a moment, playing with your brain and not just with your fingers. And I think that last season, Bale was probably just getting cards on the board, trying to overcome nerves. This time around, you saw him breathing steadily, staying focused, seemed very, very calm this whole way through, and you see the difference here today.
Yeah, there's been actually a great amount of moments today that you always want to point out, like leaked elixir in a positive light. We saw that from a lot of the head-to-head winners, where they would take that extra second, that extra moment, that extra leaked elixir to make the best play. In last game, I highlighted kind of, when he got that knight down in front of the Musketeer, just to leak a little bit of elixir and make sure he gets the right push coming across. It's those small things that show you that your young player has the maturity to be one of the greats.
Yeah, and this was a big win overall for Dig. Of course, next weekend they have Team Liquid, which will be maybe a little harder out than Cream Royale Betis, a very difficult one there. And then Cream gets next weekend against a team full of rookies, a chance to bounce back against Pain.
Yeah, big matchups for both those guys. Obviously, Dig hoping that them beating Cream will translate over. But next up, 2 huge squads in SK and Team Queso, who will reign supreme.
Here we go. Dignitas with the small upset in our second match of the day. And here we go into our third and final one. Andrew, you said before, two high-powered teams, Team Queso and SK Gaming, both former divisional champions, going head-to-head here in week number 2.
Yeah, it's really interesting here because I do give the 2v2 matchup, I give the favor to Morten and Sam. I really do. Even though Kuchi and Benny have done a lot in their careers together, we've seen them be a little bit less consistent than Sam and Morten. That being said, with the addition of IMJP and Ruben in the last couple seasons and the way that they've been playing in the most recent offseason, I give them the edge in King of the Hill. So I think it really just comes down to what we see out of Javi Catorce today and how well the head-to-head stars on Team Queso play. Because, look, I still believe Morten is S+ tier. I really do. I think he's one of the best in the world. I just feel like you still want Javi to be your head-to-head star. And you want Morten to come out in 2v2 and in King of the Hill and do work. Hopefully finish the match in those 2 sets. But Javi is going to kind of be the X factor for me for SK today.
He's absolutely huge. He's key. And, you know, that's one of the things about Team Queso is they're the only team that I think of in this league overall that feels like even if they lose most of the 2v2s, that they're still going to win more of their matches overall. And it's because of that 1-2 punch of Ruben and IMJP, who both have, of course, been top tier throughout their careers, but seem like they are in the best form of their careers right now.
And let's also not forget about the moments that Kuchiku and Benny, who have been in their careers as Clash Royale players. I mean, you know, even back in 2017, we were told that these guys have had more live experience than tons and tons of people out there that get way more credit than them. Just because they're kind of quiet, they kind of hang back, they're buddy-buddy, they're really chill dudes. But this is a really big moment for Kuchi and Benny to let everyone know, to put them on watch. We are the same duo that you saw in 2017 that should be in that top tier.
Look, if they can take the 2v2 off of SK Gaming, you can almost wrap it up with a bow at that point. It's going to be so difficult for SK to come back after that one. So we'll see if Kuchi and Benny have what it takes against Sam and Morten. Let's jump into it. SK Gaming and Team Queso.
Queso was really a battle of the cream of the crop. It's just going to be about how their superstars come through and play.
Double barrels in on the right-hand side. Poison trying to do it. Goblin barrel on. Oh my gosh, I don't know if this is going to happen. 537.
Oh my gosh, 14 HP! A second late on the earthquake.
Ponto pra levar! É torre no chão!
A vitória é da Team Queso, Tegão!
La ganó Javier. Javi, en un push.
Já foi, já era, não. Pode até ser um PTzão ali, hein? Será? A alegria de quem colocou o Ruben no Fantasy.
Que isso? Olha o dano que vai colocando. Parou agora um pouco, já tem veneno colocado, mas não tem mais fôlego.
As mais esperadas também, a SK sempre é muito forte, já foi campeã da CRL West, mas de resultados mais recentes, com certeza a Team Queso tá como mais favorito.
Here, it gets drop damage on top of that. 42 HP, a spell will come in. GG, well played. Great triple elixir correction by OP Sam and Morten to take their first game of the fall. And you saw there some highlights from last weekend between both of these teams, and Team Queso's Kuchi and Benny so far do have the 2v2 record that they want. They are 1-0 in sets overall, but playing against 2 rookies last weekend versus playing against Morten and OP Sam this weekend, a whole different ballgame. Javi Catorce and Sergio Ramos riding out that team that, much like TNT and the rest of the squad from Tribe Gaming, has 3 players in the top 10 for career win rates in CRL.
Yeah, which is why we've seen SK Gaming be so successful in their tenure at CRL, building it around that superstar in Morten. And speaking of superstars, you could argue that there's 4 of them here on Team Queso. Benny and Kuchiku obviously a little bit quieter, but they've been around since day one and have accomplished a lot in their careers. IMJP and Ruben, 2 studs here in head-to-head play. A lot of people calling them the 1 and 2 best in the world, and the fact that they're both on Team Queso is pretty pretty incredible if you're talking about looking at what Furrier and all of them have done over there for Queso. I think this is going to be one of the better 2v2 matchups we've seen in a while. I think there's going to be a lot to prove here from Kuchi and Benny, and you know that Sam and Morten are never going to sleep on opponents with this much potential.
Yeah, I mean, Sam and Morten so far starting off 2-0 on the season. I believe 60% career as a 2v2 duo, which is absolutely bonkers for their overall performance. But Kuchi and Benny started off their season well again, though. You can't discount they started off against two rookies in their first ever appearance in CRL versus one of the most experienced duos, not just in terms of overall experience, but as a duo in Sam and Morten.
So the bans for the day, SK banning Tornado and Kuchi and Benny banning Mega Knight. So maybe going to see some 6-man here from the cheesy ones.
Possible. They could also go with some Royal Hogs against the German squad, which we've seen teams go pigs against Sam and Morten often. Maybe a bit of a tip of the hat to how much those two love playing.
Yeah, very, very true. And looking like Loon here, but still very, very early.
Magic Archer, don't see a ton of Magic Archer in 2v2.
Could be Ram Rider as well.
Lumberjack will not get up in time to protect that Magic Archer. He does get taken off there by the Musketeer, and now counter push building from SK Gaming.
Yeah, nice skeletons there to preserve the entire HP of that Lumberjack, which actually allows him to get a big swing on the tower. And that all goes back to those 1 Elixir Skellies played earlier.
You know, Stikel cards weren't played as much in the first season of CRL 2v2, right? People kind of thought about 2v2 as so big, so heavy. It was Lava Hound, Golem like crazy all the time in 2v2 at that stage. But as we've seen the players get better and more experienced, and this is a giant skeleton making a beeline for the tower. Fisherman will pull and get a King Tower activation, but Hog sneaking on through the back end.
Yeah, you know, and the second I said Ram Rider, I was like, I should have said Hog Rider, because we saw this a lot last season, and we've seen it a lot before. The idea is you get the Lumberjack and Giant Skeleton on the way through with something very far behind that provides a lot of DPS, like the Magic Archer to pierce or the Musketeer, and then of course you get the Hog Rider in after the Lumberjack goes down to get that rage up, and of course hopefully that Giant Skeleton bomb will go off and clean up any DPS units there to meet said Hog Rider.
Magic Archer cycles to the left-hand lane here, will force out some sort of response, and it's a big one. 10 elixir spent, Giant Skeleton, Musketeer, and now we're switching lanes, it seems, for the full-on fight.
Yeah, so here we go. Giant Skeleton up front, Hog Rider kind of caught in traffic there with the Magic Archer far behind.
And a solid defensive heal spirit will keep that Giant Skeleton putting pressure on the left-hand lane, but now it's Queso switching back again one more time. This Fisherman might end up doing the work the wrong direction here. Does pull the Lumberjack over, but gives a bit of a rage in the opposite direction.
Yeah, and there you see the Earthquake coming down to meet the cage. So double Hog EQ with some spells all over the board, and a freeze comes in defensively.
A really nasty freeze as well. Holds that whole push back long enough here. Ewiz needs to come out for the balloon to make sure that raged up attack does not hit, but as we go into sudden death overtime, Sam and Morten ahead 890 to 1682.
Yeah, and the one frustrating thing here is that Giant Skeleton being played up high by Morten and Sam really make it impossible to get all those units in front of the Hog Rider. That's really a necessity for Kuchi and Benny.
Hog Rider does slide on through. Fisherman pulls the Hog to the opposite side.
I like that.
Good spread here by the Germans. Final 90 seconds and good bit of fireball cycle. But the heal spirit puts that Musketeer almost back to full health.
The Fisherman plays by Morten and Sam have just been so excellent. It's keeping basically all the offense that Queso can provide at bay.
This is one of the few matchups we're going to see in 2v2 where you can see that the duos are playing side by side. Kuchi and Benny sitting next to each other in the Team Queso house, Morten and Sam doing the same thing in the SK Gaming house. So lots of communication here.
Yeah, and that's again why I think this is going to be such a heated 2v2 matchup.
Final minute, triple elixir down, and this time the Magic Archer does get on tower. Fireball comes in, but a huge counter push coming down right now from SK.
Huge counter push, but that Giant Skeleton goes down, the bomb goes off, and Kuchi and Benny have some great defense being played.
That Heal Spirit does get in, a huge Heal Spirit here, 526 to 595. Giant Skeleton again, Hog Rider behind, and a double, it's a poison EQ drop. Neither one gets the Goblin Cage.
Neither on the cage, but a lot of damage in on that tower.
Magic Archer cannot put it quite in range. Defensive freeze, and here you go. Quesos, Kuchi, and Benny take game number 1. Huge performance by the Spaniards.
And look at the celebration from Queso. It looks like they just won the lottery. It's just game 1 of set 1, but they know how monumental that win is. And the way that they did it, it wasn't by matchup, it wasn't by luck, it was by beautiful plays from both sides of the boards. Those Magic Archers from Queso were just perfection. You figure out your Hog can't get through to the tower. How do we get damage in? Well, I know. How about spells and that piercing arrow?
And they got one big one there during that final race. You saw neither spell getting on the Goblin Cage, and it felt like that might have been a problem. But when that Giant Skeleton came down, lined up the Magic Archer for one key shot, and able to get on through, get the win, Kuchi and Benny with a big Game 1 win over SK.
And that's why this deck is so fun to play in 2v2. It makes your opponent have to deal with like 4 separate layers of offense. They got to deal with you at the bridge, they got to deal with what's happening behind the bridge, they have to deal with whatever's going to happen in the center of their map, so usually a building, and then of course that Hog Rider coming in at the end on top of their Princess Tower. So they're finding 4 points of contact that all demand a response, which is why this deck dominated the 2v2 meta for a few weeks.
And you see here, it felt like it could be trouble even though they were ahead, but Magic Archer gets a piercing shot through, and those 2 balloons, defensive freeze comes in, stops everything right there. Snowball finishes off the game. Very, very well played. Clean play in the high-pressure moments from Team Queso. That was key here.
Finding great moments for that defensive freeze, getting the most they could out of that Inferno Tower. Very, very expensive, but you couple that with the freeze, get something up front to protect, and that Inferno Tower all of a sudden is lasting 3 times longer, which is going to really, really help going up against the deck they were playing against. And then, that being said, they get that Giant Skeleton down to play defense. If it even survives with a sliver of health, you can put that Hog Rider Lumberjack behind because it's going to disrupt the defense being played.
So does SK Gaming go to quadruple bait here in this situation? And does Team Queso play to predict that one? We've seen SK do it a bunch, and we know Morten, of course, one of the top log bait players in history.
Yeah, I definitely want to see some sort of maybe bait. I don't care if it's like traditional log bait. I don't think maybe that's the way. Maybe it's more of like a minor plus bait, whatever that may be. I really, really enjoy when the Germans play minors. I know they're very good with that quick cycle, and NATO's not in play. So maybe we'll see something like that here in game number 2.
Let's go ahead, jump on into it. Team Queso with set point here. Sam and Morten needing 2 in a row to win the opening stanza.
So, alrighty then.
All right. So I'm wondering if Queso and Tribe were scrimming this week. Is that a possibility?
Maybe. And obviously with that Mega Knight ban, you have to expect something like this could come into play. Wow. That is a lot to deal with.
And I'm also wondering, I didn't get a chance to watch East last week, and I wonder if this popped up in CRL East.
I mean, look at the damage that just came in on the right-hand side. It looked like Sam and Morten did have the answers. Beautiful defense on the left for, you know, somewhat cheap. Cleans up those Musketeers with that Giant Skeleton Bomb, but goodness, that clone with the cannon carts, the double barrels, a lot of damage in.
Yeah, that was bananas, best way to put it. And 3M in both hands. So last time we saw Tribe Gaming earlier today going with a 3 Musketeer Graveyard Balloon, spread you thin, keep you distracted gameplay. And now we're seeing double 3 Musketeers out of Team Queso.
Yeah, and Team Queso now can play really, really conservative for the next 30 seconds. They can keep cycling these 3Ms in the back and kind of respawn because they have such a nice damage lead, and you know that their deck is going to be in a better spot as we get into double and triple elixir time when you have, you know, 3 Musketeers in both hands.
Skeleton Barrel Lumberjack to the left-hand side. High cage here to play some defense. Well held up in both lanes here by Sam and Morten.
Yeah, that was a really, really nice sequence of defense from Sam and Morten. It's going to turn into a great counter push here in the right-hand lane. Left-hand lane was more so to bait out Elixir from their opponents.
Just death damage from this balloon. 2462 won't hold on that long. So first significant connection from the Germans. 2190 remains as we go into double.
Yeah, so 2 Musketeers cycled in the back and 3 Musketeers cycled in the back for Team Queso.
You see waiting just a little bit there is Morten to get that fireball on precisely where he wanted it.
And so Kuchi and Benny kind of surprised Sam and Morten in that very first exchange. But now that they've figured out, they've kind of cracked the code to what their opponent's planning to do offensively, the question is, will Queso, Kuchi, and Benny be able to break through once again?
Well, I don't know what the last card is in Benny Who's hand, but as you can see right now, they only have 1 direct damage spell overall through their the 15 cards we've seen so far, Snowball. So
yeah,
if this comes down to a spell cycle game at the end, this is going to be a huge advantage for SK.
Fireball coming out, hits 2 of the 3 Musketeers, and a freeze in from Morten and Sam. There's that 15 or 16. Oh, nope. Talking about the other team. My bad.
Here we go. 1-shot Musketeer on the right-hand side. Not going to worry about that. This game just got much, much closer. And again, the spell firepower of SK Gaming could end up being a critical factor as we are not separated by a lot, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, the spell value that they're getting after those shields are taken down from the Royal Recruits has been massive every single time, whether it's just a fireball log or, you know, just a log to take the shields off and then defense in kind. So a big push on the left-hand side. Log a little early?
Very well handled, though. There's going to be some significant damage, but that could have been a whole lot worse. Lumberjack trying to go coast to coast. Fireball, and those Musketeers sat there waiting for that Lumberjack.
Fireball pushes that Fisherman out of range of the Musketeers, though. Maybe would have taken 1 more off the board. Now we get another huge left-hand push here, and a defensive freeze comes in.
Yeah, nice use of the defensive freeze to make sure that clone didn't do a whole lot, although now Queso way ahead on Elixir with 45 seconds. Damage lead, Elixir lead, pressure like crazy. Things looking very difficult for SK.
Yeah, SK still down a game here. Has to win this one if they want to stay alive in this 2v2 set, but Queso making that near impossible.
Huge opportunity. Freeze should be back in cycle.
Wow.
2 balloons down. Rage, and the clone can't do it. Fireball comes in. Oh my gosh,
Rich,
G, well played.
Was a gigantic push coming down the right-hand lane. You saw that second balloon come in, and everyone knew exactly what was going to happen.
Wow. Absolute wow. You saw Kuchi and Benny in control for so long, but Sam and Morten able to get spell value over and over with how much was on the board, and you saw that last one. They weren't worried about the left-hand side at all. They had it controlled, able to push on the right, and that desperation clone out of Kuchi and Benny, the freeze in response, easy pickings there. GG, well played.
And now that we actually get to see all 16 cards being played, it is really fascinating to see that the only spell, the true damage-dealing spell, is just the snowball to get on that Princess Tower. So let's take a look at some of the defenses that have been played by Sam and Morten here in this last game. And the clones were used brilliantly by Queso.
Yeah, and this one just kind of caught their opponents flat-footed. I mean, they saw 3 Musketeers, they're like, what, really? 3M? All right. Clone came in, put a ton of damage, but here we go into the final 30 seconds, and that skeleton bomb on the left just means that they can do everything they want on the right-hand side.
Yeah, that coupled with 4 skeleton dragons, a musketeer hiding in there, you sneak in a heal spirit with 2 balloons, and there's just no way to deal with that at all. Plus, we all knew that freeze was about to come in. It was just a matter of when they wanted to actually pull the trigger on it, and it was going to happen after their opponents sold out on taking out the first balloon, not the second.
Well, you see a 3 Musketeer down too, Andrew, and if you see the timing there, the clone comes down on the 3 Musketeers pretty much the exact same time as the freeze comes in. So
right,
it's 3 elixir that you don't have for anything else. Now everything is locked up. at that point, it just felt like Kuchi and Benny were trying to find air when they were already 6 feet under.
Yeah, and Sam and Morton recognizing that the freeze was going to be one of their best defensive spells because of its effect against the clone. It really, really helped stop everything in its tracks. And then for things like the skeleton barrel that we're going to pop, it still put it that much farther away from their Princess Tower. So really, really nice use of the freeze by Sam and Morton defensively for almost the entire game until that last big balloon push.
It looked for such a long time like it was going to be a quick 2-0 sweep.
Yeah.
For Kuchi and Benny. It really looked like they had everything locked up, the big early damage, the big early lead. But one of the things we noticed was that they didn't have any way to continue putting damage on that tower unless they broke through. And as soon as Sam and Morton realized that, they knew it was just about not letting anything actually get through here. We're not going to lose a spell cycle game, and that takes so much mental pressure off of what you're trying to do in those moments.
Yeah, I mean, not only are they up in the spell cycle game, but if you look again at what they have, Kuchi and Benny, there's just no way to get to the high DPS units in the back. There isn't. You have to break through and then target them, and that's just something that isn't really going to happen much in 2v2. It's too easy to defend with 15 other cards in play to save that one. It's just really tough to get to the second level and take out that DPS.
Here we go, game number 3 of our 2v2 set.
Kuchi and Benny playing very, very well for, let's say, 1.9 games. But Morton and Sam stealing that second game evens things up here in this 2v2 set.
And an interesting choice to go right back to it one more time from Kuchi and Benny.
I'm curious if they'll have more spell power this time around.
And that'll be a raged up Royal Giant early all over that tower with a little bit of defense in front of it. So that RG going to get a ton of damage on the right-hand side.
Yeah, and 14 elixir in the hand to deal with this counter push. It feels like a pretty good spot for Morton and Sam to be in. Oh.
Yeah, early clone. Bomb tower down, maybe a half step late, but still it's SK Gaming out to a significant lead. Weren't worried about that clone whatsoever.
Yeah, a bit of an early sellout there from Team Queso to kind of show their entire hand. You've got 2 sets of 3 Musketeers, you got the barrel, you got the clone in, so now Sam and Morton know exactly how to manage what Queso's going to throw at them.
And you just saw a very deep breath out of Kuchiku, so maybe realizing that their big play didn't go quite how they wanted.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was. It was a massive play early on that they got very little out of.
Oh boy.
Yep.
Well, that's going to be an even trade plus tower damage or one more troop every single time. Good choice in the lightning, which you don't see a ton of in 2v2. Sam and Morton one step ahead of their opponents.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they knew that Kuchi and Benny were going to run it back, or maybe they were looking at the other most popular archetypes and went, all right, lightning has got an 80% chance of paying off.
So they'll get that value from it every single time. And again, we're looking at all the spells that are in the hands of Sam and Morton, able to spend 6 on the right-hand side, and they should be able to defend this as well.
That bomb tower, I mean, this is just, you talk about matchup in 2v2, this is extraordinarily bad for Queso.
This level of matchup differential rarely happens in 2v2, right? If you look at any of the pros and coaches talking about it on Twitter,
yeah,
you'll see them talk about how 2v2 is the skill game in CRL. But this is one of those situations where it really seems like Sam and Morton just had this thing read all the way down, made some adjustments, and said, look, this is strong, and it's absolutely brutal against what we think they'll do again. Getting the win here in the opening set.
What a frustrating set for Kuchi and Benny. I mean, they played that perfect through, like I said, 1 game and 90% of their second game. And Morton and Sam somehow the Germans steal it from them in game number 2. And then that leads them to that horrible matchup in game 3. Hindsight 2020, I don't like them running back the same deck because of how it fared, but in theory, I do love them running it back because I can't imagine that anyone other than Morten and Sam would have been like, they're gonna do it again.
I mean, we see it so often with when someone runs a trick deck in game number 1 of 2v2, we rarely see them go back to it in game number 2.
Yeah.
But when players run a trick deck in game 2, you'll see them go, or they run something in game 2, they'll go back to it more often in game number 3. So it's an interesting bit of rhythm there that maybe Sam and Morten were attuned to. Not to mention, look, this is still a solid deck with how popular Musketeer is overall in the game. Having one Lightning, not a bad idea in 2v2. In this case, it paid off in triplicate.
Yeah, not at all. That's a really, really strong point you make. Maybe Lightning going to come right back into that 2v2 meta. And then again, since Royal Recruits are so popular right now, and Musketeers, maybe we start to see more Mini P.E.K.K.A.s. Now, Mini P.E.K.K.A. came out as the last card from Sam, but you think about how much a Mini P.E.K.K.A. can actually accomplish once that log comes down on top of a 5 push of 3 Royal Recruits and 2 Musketeers. If any of that's distracted at all and you drop a Mini P.E.K.K.A. in the thick of it, that's easy pickings for Mini P.E.K.K.A. right there, and for very, very cheap. So Sam and Morten, Lightning, Mini P.E.K.K.A., Bomb Tower, Log, there's no way this 3M 6-man deck is going to break through.
Well, and they had 2 ways to take the 3 Musketeers, or to deal with the 2 Musketeers on the split, right? They had the Lightning, and then we saw them later go Fireball, Snowball. So there was really just nothing that those 2 Musketeers could do. It was always going to be an even trade plus tower damage every single time. So great decksmanship from Sam and Morten. Something we expect from those 2. Yeah, you want it to happen. It's happening right now, Andrew. Great decksmanship from those 2, and a big time win. And the 2v2 set that you really felt like SK needed to win.
Yeah.
Because I think that from this point on, King of the Hill is a coin flip with these 2 teams. 1v1 is a coin flip with these 2 teams. So a good win here for SK.
Yeah, massive win for SK. I think it was a must win for both squads, honestly, because what does that do to the confidence of Kuchi and Benny if they actually take that win? Now it's still back to the aren't we good enough to be at that 2v2 level against the best squads like Tribe, SSG, SK. So a frustrating out for them, but now this is where the scale feels to tip back in favor of Team Queso if they weren't down a set. Because if you talk about head-to-head play, we got OP Sam, Morten, and Javi coming out for SK, but then IMJP and Ruben as the 1-2 punch with Kuchi to close things out. Why is Kuchi closing things out? Because he's untiltable. He is able to always stay in the zone. That's something we've known for 3 years now.
And this is key here. It's very common as we go into game number 1. This is the King of the Hill that Queso runs a lot. They ran out a lot during the No Tilt League Special Edition. JP 1, Ruben 2, with Kuchi or Benny as number 3. And they love to come out firing hot right out the gate. No surprises here from the cheesy ones.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly, the boom or bust play at IMJP, the methodical and quick adjustments that Ruben will make there in the middle, and of course the calm and cool that you'll get from your 2 veterans on the back end.
And I like putting Sam here in the opening spot. People forget how good Sam is as a head-to-head player. He got a number 1 finish on ladder this year, right? So not long ago, top finish on ladder. The guy is a brilliant player, talented player, and maybe doesn't get his overall just due in King of the Hill here in CRL with Morten and Javi as his teammates.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Morten, Javi, you look at even Sergio being, the former world champion CCGS. It's the type of thing where how do you play Sam over those guys? They're all incredible. Sam is a phenomenal guy, and we saw a lot of that on TSM, but, when you have Morten and Javi there, and even Sergio, he kind of just plays that 2v2.
Both players here have 2 career sweeps in King of the Hill. JP's both coming in CRL EU back in 2018 against G2 and Liquid. Sam putting up 1 that season for TSM, and then 1 back in that fall championship run for SK.
Sam winning the interaction battle thus far, getting damage on both towers and being up in Elixir. And this is exactly what you expect from the Mad Scientist.
Heading into double Elixir time so far. Slight lead for OP Sam, the German personal best on ladder, 84.02. JP, no slouch himself, 86.12 for the Spaniard.
Double Elixir time coming in. Maybe going to see that 6-man cycled. Yes, there they are. 4-2 split to the left. So very slow play from both of these players, not trying to
get caught out early.
And
That cannon cart, if you overcommit, can be devastating, Andrew.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and I love to see that from IMJP. You expect that from Sam. And IMJP had that fireball early on to clear up those skeleton dragons, then kind of doubled down on it. But he really has been playing much more patient.
RG in, will it get a shot on tower? One does get off, and the Ram Rider does not connect. 1371 remains on JP's left-hand tower.
Yeah, and you really have to wonder what that does to the mentality of IMJP, now looking that he's getting to double elixir time and hasn't really touched the towers, but he does have Sam beat when you talk about heaviness on the board.
Fireball does take the skeleton dragons off the board, critical here. And this cannon cart trying to sneak on through to tower. Low Musketeer takes care of business, though. Solid play here by Sam to preserve that lead as we are in sudden death.
And that's exactly what Sam needs to do. Every single sequence is focused entirely on the cannon cart, making sure that that's the first thing that goes down, or making sure that it will go down. Then he can deal with the 6-man and the Musketeer.
And there you have it. One more time, Andrew. The cannon cart, does it drop? No, still on its wheels. Cannon cart does get to the Musketeer. Is that close enough? No, DPS keeps it off. Final minute approaching, and a big breath from Sam.
Yeah, it's because he's starting to feel the game slip out of his control. Not out of his, reach to win, but just slightly out of his control, and that's because he's spending a little bit more than he'd like on these pushes from IMJP, and with an entire minute left, that's still enough time to lose.
Fireball working, cannon cart connects on tower on the right-hand side. That is a huge connection, and just like that, JP gonna nearly even things up with 50 seconds left.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly why we saw that shift in energy from Sam, as he feels it moving away from him because of these massive pushes, these beefy pushes coming across the river, and now he's got to deal with another one on the left-hand side.
Fireball clears out skeleton dragons and back around to them one more time. Final 30 seconds.
Oh.
Ram Rider in on the right.
A great heal spirit on the left to bring out those skeleton dragons, and now Ram Rider left. RG in.
Royal Giant has nothing in its way. That's going to be it. RG going to take the tower on the left-hand side. IMJP had a moment, but Sam, calm, collected, and you see a bit of a breath there, makes the right adjustment and punishes in the final seconds.
IMJP could feel he was wearing Sam down. If this is back in the day when there's 6-minute matches, I bet we see IMJP steal that match from Sam. But since we take away that 1 minute, IMJP, when things started to shift his way, he did not have enough time. So you saw him sell out on the right-hand lane, but at the same time, you've got an RG clear path to your Princess Tower on the left, and that is when Sam took the dub.
Yeah, very nicely played. And yeah, you saw, like we talked about it, you saw sort of the stress level on Sam. Let's take a look at this final 90 seconds here, or these final few moments. And there were a couple connections you can see. This is before the big cannon cart connection on the right-hand side, Andrew. Talk us through these final moments, because this was huge.
It's just incredible dual lane pressure coming out from IMJP, and Sam kind of having a difficulty navigating how to get there, because he has to deal with things in sequence, like I was saying before. He has to go Musketeer, then he has to go Cannon Cart. Hopefully there's not a Ram Rider in there as well. So dealing with these things layer after layer after layer ended up putting him in a small elixir hole, because you can't do it perfectly 100% of the time. IMJP recognized that, turned up the heat, but then Sam was able to kind of equalize things for just one moment and then get back on offense.
And you see that Ram Rider getting ping-ponged between those two fishermen, completely stopped on that right-hand side, and you gotta wonder if maybe that was a bit of a miscalculation in the cycle from JP to throw the Ram Rider into a situation that was impossible to connect.
Yeah, and JP didn't have a lot of great ways to keep that RG off the tower, and he didn't want to cycle his cannon cart early and have it die defensively, because he needed the offensive presence from the cannon cart. The other option he had was to cycle cannon carts early on, and then maybe they die on his side of the map and play the building that he kind of needs to hold that RG. But the problem is that if he does that, then Sam just goes, all right, I'll just wait. I'll just hold my RG until your cannon cart's back out of cycle.
So JP down, Sam with the big win to open things up for SK Gaming. Coming up next, another very difficult opponent, one of the few truly S-tier players on the planet, Ruben for Team Queso in game number 2.
Yeah, and if you're Team Queso and all of a sudden OP Sam, a guy that wasn't even in the head-to-head lineup ends up taking out your 1-2 punch. That can't feel very safe for Team Queso.
Well, again, you know, I said about this earlier in this matchup that Sam doesn't really get his just due as a top-tier head-to-head player because he's really been such a big part of the 2v2 and because Morten and Javi have carried so much during their CRL tenure, but you don't get #1 on ladder without being really, 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 really good at Clash Royale. And Sam just did that back in the spring, so this is definitely a high-level talent for SK.
Yeah, and I think it took Sam a minute to kind of adjust to the formats switching from 17 to 18 because, you know, we gave him the nickname the Mad Scientist when he joined the league because he was able to really use the card bans in his advantage to build these crazy decks. I think it took him a while to readjust to having to play strictly meta or close to meta decks and archetypes because it just wasn't his playstyle for so long.
Heal Spirit does bring the Skeleton Dragons back up, but nice pickup there from Ruben, distracting the Fisherman. RG gets a big chunk of that tower damage.
Yeah, will he, won't he is the game that Ruben was playing right there, and he decided that, you know what, no matter what, if this Fisherman comes down and he decides to meet it, I am going to get a lot of damage in. So a bit of a ballsy move early on that really pays off.
Interesting differentiation in control archetypes for Ruben and Sam. Ruben opting to go Goblin Cage to distract against the Royal Giant that will be seen from Sam soon. Sam choosing to go Hunter and Fisherman as his primary control mechanism. Does have the log for knockback, though, which does change the math a bit.
Yeah, and Sam's has to feel a little bit uneasy about his decision in the Hunter Fisherman after his first attempt to use the Hunter Fisherman goes, not his way.
Well, I think we're going to see a protection battle up high, Andrew. We'll see Sam drop the Fisherman to pull the RG. The Fisherman come down for Ruben to counter. The Skeletons come down for the counter. It's going to be a true chess match here at the bridge.
And that's exactly what we just saw right there, but once again, it was Ruben kind of a step ahead on the left-hand side, but he sacrifices a lot of damage on the right.
Sam getting that right-hand tower down to 10-23. Fireball log trying to do enough to keep at least one RG shot off, and it does hold it to 1. Although right now, Ruben does have the damage and elixir advantage.
So that's 3 aggressive Fishermans in a row out of Ruben. The first 2 actually pay off pretty well. That third one not doing what he'd like. So Sam's starting to kind of adjust, adapt, and evolve to the way that Ruben is playing his defense.
Keep an eye on what happens at the river in between the 2 bridges. That's where this fight is going to be won and lost. Fisherman there in the middle. Skeletons, do they pull? Yes, they do distract the Fisherman for a second.
Ooh,
RG will still go and get 1 shot.
I think this is maybe a little bit of trouble here for Ruben. No, able to get that all held at the bridge.
And Sam's going to have to eat a little bit of damage on this right-hand side, knowing that's not the tower he's concerned with at the moment.
Yeah.
Royal Giant gets 1 shot on the left, 778 to 623, but that Fisherman is completely distracted from the Royal Giant.
Yes, it is. Now needing to keep that Fisherman distracted, not able to, pulls it to the center. RG still focused on the tower.
Ewis trying to stun, 524 remaining. Sam slightly ahead with 70 seconds left.
And not able to get an RG down is Ruben. He goes for it anyway. He goes down to 0. Hunter there to meet. Heal Spirit in.
Huge Fisherman pull. Royal Giant doesn't get 1 shot and 1 big-time shot. RG the opposite direction, though. Cage should be back in cycle for Ruben. Cage high right now. And can he get past this Ewis? Fireball in. RG shoots 270. This is so crazy, Andrew.
He gets that 1 shot in. Fireball just in time. He's got to meet this Heal Spirit or it's going to heal it. He doesn't get it in.
And the Fisherman battle won by Ruben. What an exchange there at the river between the 2 bridges. Ruben gets the best of the end, and it felt like, it seems like a cliche to say it, but it felt like whoever got the last shot got the best shot there, Andrew. And Ruben it felt like they were playing that game where you hold a stick or a bat and you see whose hand is on top at the end. And you can see that you know who's going to get it there in the last few moments. And it felt like that was Ruben.
And a great number of Heal Spirits came in for Ruben that entire game. He really did get that extra shot in a few times because of really excellent Heal Spirits. And again, the Fisherman plays from Ruben were so great, whether they're high and in the center or off to the left to meet the Hunter. just changing things up rapidly was why he won that. And this is the very first time the Fishermen's meet. And that's just the first exchange. In that moment, Sam's got to go, all right, I'm going to have to try a lot harder than I think this game.
And again, I said this during the actual game. Keep your eye on the space between the two bridges during this entire battle. That's where the RG Fisherman fight is won and lost. And this felt like Sam had an opportunity to take it over here. But it seemed, look at this, 369 on the left-hand side. You have to prevent 2 RG shots from getting on, and he can only stop one of them. Other one gets on easily. Fireball in, GG, well played.
Yeah, and that heal spirit you saw right there at the end of that replay just jumps right over the log, lands, and heals that Royal Giant. And it did feel like that moment was going to be it for Sam, right? If that Royal Giant gets one more shot in, all of a sudden becomes a defense and spell cycle battle as opposed to a defense and I need to get another Royal Giant down battle. So just that one small interaction. And you know, during the game, we were calling out how well Ruben defended with his E-Wiz there. That stun coming in so many times prevented at least a shot from every Royal Giant that got on his side of the board.
It was huge. It was hugely important. And now we go into game number 3 all tied up. Ruben and Morten in the swing set here for game number 3.
Yeah, Morten not faring well against Codigo in their last match, getting taken out. Obviously, Codigo did go 1-2-3 against Sergio, Javi, and Morten in King of the Hill.
Ruben currently 3-0 so far in his fall campaign. All those wins coming in the second King of the Hill set. Morten has improved his overall record on the season to 4-2. Looking to add one more here against Spain's best.
So very, very similar look coming from Team Queso and SK Gaming.
Yeah, Graveyard both directions. Ruben going with a faster cycle version of Graveyard. He played this against JP, I believe, in the Brenchong Cup 2 finals a couple weeks ago.
And that was just a little off-timed from Ruben, not able to get that Knight up front to tank for the Skeletons, but is able to get him there to tank for those Archers.
And you see Morten very low, and the Knight coming down a half-step late. It's not just Skeleton Dragons, Baby Dragon as well, and that's going to be a lot of damage the German eats early on.
Yeah, I really, really love what Ruben did right there, just to support the Archers. Now, that Knight not coming down in time to tank for the Graveyard meant that it was there to tank for those Archers, which provides so much more single-target DPS on the front end, and that's why we see Morten with just 500 HP remaining on his bottom left-hand tower.
Pretty even on Elixir, but way behind on damage right now is Morten. Not a place you want to be in this Graveyard matchup in the first place, especially not against a guy like Ruben, and especially not against the fast cycle with the very solid defense. The Archers do give poison value, but also a little better at getting those Skeletons off the board quickly.
Yeah, you know, and Morten is usually a guy that I would never count out of a game because I've seen him come back so many times with bad matchups or bad plays early on. I just can't imagine that it happens here against Ruben.
Oh yeah, it's an insanely high caliber of player. You have 2 of the top 5 competitive players in the planet, and it's really it's one of those situations where who blinks first.
Yeah, and right now Ruben just playing that perfectly. He gets the Skeletons up high to distract the Musketeer. Morten even goes in with the snowball looking for the Skeletons, but since Ruben played them so offset to the right, he's not able to hit, and those Archers win the battle against the Musketeer at the bridge for a +1 trade.
Final 10 seconds of regulation, sudden death overtime on its way. And Ruben going in with the Graveyard, even though no tank is currently available. You can see so much damage still getting in, and it's Graveyard Snowball. You always think about Graveyard Poison as the combination, Andrew.
Yep.
But Snowball, you saw there pushing troops out of the way, slowing them down. Really underrated in terms of how it impacts a Graveyard push.
Yeah, I mean, there's something that's kind of been a bit of a fallacy as the game's evolved, and that's that you never send in a naked Graveyard, because usually it just allows your opponent to defend easily and come back with a massive counter push, and you just spent 5 Elixir. The problem is that now Graveyard plus Snowball has become so devastating. Slows that tower down just enough, and Ruben takes that with barely taking a lick of damage from Morten.
Yeah, got ahead early and kept the pressure on. Ruben now still undefeated, 4-0 overall on the season. And if Team Queso can do this and do this consistently, they are going to be one of the scariest teams in the league.
So if you rewind to the top of this match, I said that Javi 14 was going to be the X factor of the match today. Whether it was the X factor for Queso or for SK, that's yet to be determined. But right now, Javi is going to have to beat Ruben in 3 games over his next 4. That's what has to happen, because he is going to be the guy that comes out in head-to-head play. It will be Ruben, and it will be Javi.
Hey, Javi is certainly a guy who can take out Ruben and Kuchiku. If he can win against Ruben, you know, you're betting Javi versus Kuchi. You give Javi the advantage overall. So this next one could be critical. Yep. It could be very critical. A win here for Javi might mean a 2-set sweep for SK game.
So what I love about this sequence is that Graveyard coming in early demands the poison out of Morten. So now he's down Elixir. That Knight being played up high is getting tanked for by the Skeletons, and the Archer's getting tanked for by the Knight. So it was just this really excellent sequence of baiting out a spell from your opponent, making him hit 0 on Elixir, and recognizing how much you could do with such cheap cards.
It's one more example of how much gameplay has shifted just in the 5 seasons of CRL that we've been casting, Andrew, because conventional wisdom for a long time with Graveyard was save your Graveyard until double. Same thing for Golem, same thing for Lava Hound, same thing for Royal Giant. For so many of these bigger cards, it was save it until double. And we're seeing here the level of aggression. It's been such a shift. We're seeing Graveyards played in single Elixir, Lava first play, a complete flip-flop of how this game was played 2 years ago.
Well, you talk to guys like Lapacati, Igor, Jack, Expo Master, guys that are really expect them to be able to outplay their opponents by turning up the cycle and by turning up the interactions per minute per second. And that's really, I think, a testament to what you're talking about right now.
Here we go, game number 4. Ruben with set point, a chance to send this to the 3rd and final. Javi 14, though, wants to send his countrymen back packing.
That's right. Looking to take out Ruben and then Kuchiku for the easy 2-set sweep. Well, maybe not so easy. 2-set sweep for SK Gaming.
Lifetime win rate in CRL for Javi 14, 61%. And one of the highest collection in terms of overall games played at 122.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about numbers like that, it's basically him and Elsiop.
The most games played of any player in CRL West. The God RF with 164. I know, it's absolutely bananas. Next closest, Canario at 142. So a lot of experience over, and if you look at the top players who've played the most, RF, Canario, Morten, Razor, and Javi in that order have all played 122 games or more. Pretty good list to be on.
Yeah, pretty good company, right?
Mega Knight to the left-hand side. Cannon Cart will be stopped at the bridge.
So Mega Knight going to be a bit of a fortunate card to have in Javi's arsenal as you look at the units that he can run into with the 6-man and, of course, that Musketeer and Cannon Cart. Just getting that drop down on one side is going to be really nice, but you can't imagine you're going to get all of those cards in one lane. There's going to be a lot of dual lane pressure.
Yeah, Javi getting caught out bad here, though. Ooh. The Mega Knight out of cycle, the Royal Recruits covering for the Ram Rider, the Musketeer in the back. Javi got caught looking there, cycled the Mega Knight early, and Ruben just punished him all the way.
And you see that Javi calling out the good luck because of that cycled Mega Knight early. A great Barb Barrel comes in after the Ram Rider, but before the Musketeer crosses the river for Ruben to give him one additional tank that Musketeer did not need, and that's Tower Down early on.
You see Javi shaking his head, and the hard thing here is what other great responses did he have to the Cannon Cart? The Cannon Cart really demanded that the Mega Knight come out as a response. Well, okay, you have no Mega Knight. Well, I have a pile of recruits plus a Ram Rider. How are you going to stop it?
There's just a lot here that went wrong for Javi. You know, that Mega Knight being out of cycle, not having the Barb Barrel in cycle because he played it early on to meet that. There's just a lot going on here, which is probably why Javi calls out good luck, because if you look at what he has in response, he has a Fisherman, he has the Fireball, he has a lot of units to deal with the win condition of Ruben.
And just look at the huge chunk of damage that Javi's getting here. If this were 30 seconds earlier, we'd be going, oh my gosh, look at all that damage.
Yep.
It's too little too late. Javi playing way too far behind. And that's some experience from Ruben, knowing he could eat a lot of that damage and not panicking because he knew that there was no way for Javi to do that a second time.
I mean, that has just got to be so frustrating for Javi. But that's what happens when you're playing against the best in the world. You cycle things, and they know immediately what you're playing, and they know exactly how they can take advantage of it. So he sees a Bar Barrel and a Mega Knight out early. That gives him the go-ahead, the green light to really, really put extra elixir on the board in front of that Musketeer. Because here's the thing, he would have never ever played a Ram Rider plus Musketeer plus Bar Barrel if the Mega Knight was in cycle.
Absolutely not. And there you go, big kaboom on the left-hand side. Ruben still undefeated in his 2020 fall campaign, 5-0 to start the season. I believe the most anyone's gone to start off a season is either 9-0 or 11-0. Going back to the first season, it was either Razor or Tommy. So Ruben with a good start here. Don't call it a no-hitter yet, but early action for the Spaniard.
Yeah, and if you guys go back and just look at that replay, just excellent decision-making by Ruben, really making his opponent misspend his elixir and not put it where he wanted it. So you have to imagine we're going to see the same matchup again. I can't really see SK Gaming putting in Sergio over Javi in this situation. I'm pretty sure Javi is sitting there talking to his coach right now going, oh my gosh, I had the matchup. I had a way to beat him. You saw how much damage I was able to put on in those final moments. I just played too aggressive too early on, or maybe just had a bad starting hand in his mind. So I know we're going to see Javi back out there. I can't imagine we'll see IMJP over Ruben. I think it's just going to be the exact same matchup of what we saw, but instead of a best of one, it's now going to be a best of three.
It's going to be exciting. We saw Javi and Ruben play a best of three last year in the CRL West 2019 fall split, and it was one of the best of threes in the history of CRL. If you want to go back, after this is over today, go back and watch that. You want to see one of the best CRL best of threes ever? They put it on. Javi came out on top of that one against the rookie. So the big question is, can Ruben rewrite the story in this third and final set today against Javi?
I feel like that was one of the games where Javi had used his interactions and misdirection with his units on the board better than I think we've ever seen anyone, making the offensive units of his opponent just kind of jump back and forth and move the direction that was not where he wanted him to go. And that's, again, one of the things about Javi. If you watch him play, he is so great with micro interactions and innovative micro interactions. So here we go. Will Ruben even this up at 1-1? So far, it's looking pretty good for Team Queso.
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up Javi's creativity, and I wonder about the difference in the creativity he can pull off against someone he's done it against some of the best in the business. What he did against Air Surfer in one of their games last season with the minor pull on the P.E.K.K.A. for the Mega Knight to get all the way through. I just wonder if that creativity is going to work, that trickeration is going to work against someone who's really not just S tier, S plus tier, and top 3 overall in the world right now in competitive play.
Well, it just comes down to who makes the first mistake off of something that you can't even imagine coming through. If it's something like a Goblin Cage being played in a normal spot, but then your opponent picks that apart. You know, there's things like that these guys are going to do time and time again. Ruben has now done it numerous times, and Javi showed you last game a perfect example of that. So here we go. Javi and Ruben back out again, BO3 to decide the winner of Team Queso and SK Gaming.
Javi cycling his Heal Spirit to open up. And it's going right after that cage.
And leaking some elixir, waiting to see how his opponent wants to respond. Gonna eat the barrel on the right.
Yeah, gonna take 2 shots from it. 22-16 remains, first 30 seconds away. And a Mega Knight early from Javi again.
I honestly had a feeling we would see Javi run back a very similar deck. I felt like maybe the ego behind him felt that he should have won that game with a better matchup, and he just didn't do it.
And so pigs go both directions. Javi taking a ton of damage on the right, and the Heal Spirit gets blocked by Ruben. Mega Knight does not get the advantage. Huge opening for Team Queso.
That heal spirit up high from Ruben literally saved his life this game. That Mega Knight not getting healed was everything for Team Queso.
So Javi, a second game in a row, throws Mega Knight down early and immediately gets punished by the win condition. This time Ruben going to opposite lane, although not as big of a difference at this stage. Going to be just over 1100 HP on Javi's right-hand tower to 1663 for Ruben.
So what does Ruben start to do? And I think the answer is probably create more dual lane pressure, because his opponent doesn't have a great way to centralize or bring all those hogs to the middle of the map, you know, like a cage, something like that. Then he can drop his Mega Knight on top. So Ruben has to look for ways to get his, to make Javi's Mega Knight find less value every time it comes on the board.
Here we go. Double elixir time on its way. And you see the heal spirit there just to get that cage out a half step early. Fireball now no longer in cycle, but does get some key tower damage, 982 on the right-hand side. Muskie does not survive, though.
Yeah, frustrating for Javi there. You know he wanted to keep that Musketeer alive, so he has to use the Skeleton Dragons to help out.
Fireball goes way to the back there, gets the Musketeer off the board, or not off the board, but down very low. But a huge push coming in. Is Mega Knight available?
Should be. There it is.
A little splash comes in. Final 20 seconds.
So Javi, yep, looking high into the middle to find that cage. He needs to figure out a way to make that Mega Knight get through to the tower.
Heal Spirit just has not got it done yet for Javi in these matchups.
That barrel was not going to do what Javi wanted.
Oh, the Fireball misses the Musketeer. This could be big for Javi.
Yeah, this is big. Now you see the Bar Barrel coming in early to help that Musketeer out and off the board, allowing the Royal Hogs to go through. Mega Knight still tanking.
A lot of damage coming in, and that Musketeer demanded the extra response. You see Ruben shaking his head there, knows he made one of the rare errors he'll make in the season.
And that's exactly what Javi has to do. If Ruben's going to make a mistake, you got to capitalize. And if missing a Musketeer is all he's going to give you, then you got to take advantage of it.
And you see Javi right now doing everything he can. Oh, and the Heal Spirit pops off as well. Big moment for the SK Gaming player. Javi's trying to make sure that Fireball doesn't have to be used defensively on those Skeleton Dragons. He wants offensive damage, and so you see him keep on going to other ways to defend against the Skellies, and this is huge. Pigs all over the tower, a lot of damage, 419 to 751.
And again, it's because of the Musketeer. That Musketeer was still alive at the beginning of that Royal Hog push. 2 times in a row now, Javi has outplayed Ruben when it comes to protecting that Musketeer, and that is most likely why we're going to see SK take this first game.
Absolutely huge. Mega Knight in front of the Pigs. No building to pull them now. Fireball will clean them all the way off with the help of the Skeleton Dragons. And now it's Ruben's Musketeer staying on the board for quite a while.
And I love that Javi did not fireball that Musketeer. Instead, he saves the Elixir to get the Mega Knight back out, keeps his Musketeer alive again. Now goes Hog Rider, or excuse me, Royal Hogs plus the Fireball if necessary.
Mega Knight does not get its leap. Cage down, 419. Fireball cycle here from Ruben, trying to beat out Javi in this moment. Fireball cycle the opposite direction. Mega Knight isn't available. Pig sneaking through. 402. Fireball just barely does it. Oh my word. Javi cannot believe it.
Ruben couldn't believe it. He didn't even recognize that it hit. And when you saw when it registered, he couldn't believe it. Javi shaking his head. He played that so well, Rich. He played that so well for so long. But man, Ruben with a bad matchup still takes the dub.
That is so crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And when Javi played the Fireball, it felt like one of those things where you're giving that Pig just enough room. It's so hard to make that call in those final moments. And Ruben able to get that. I mean, you heard, if you're listening there on the broadcast right now, you heard Andrew and I both kind of stop for a second. You saw Javi and Ruben both kind of stop. No one was sure if that Fireball was going to hit. It did. And next thing you know, GG, well played. Ruben still undefeated.
Oh my goodness. I mean, it was one of those moments of do I or don't I with the fireball from Javi, and the game was so close to done. He got the Mega Knight down to protect the Musketeer. He imagined that fireball was kind of the nail in the coffin. Ruben, I don't know how he made that second last as long as it did, but he gets that fireball in just in time. And Javi Catorce has got to be incredibly tilted at this moment. We know Javi's an emotional player. I can't imagine he's anything but tilted right now.
This was such a huge chunk of damage, Andrew, and it felt like the momentum was going to swing Javi's way. Yeah, the Musketeer's on the board, but he was doing a good job. And here's the final 10 seconds. You see Javi slightly ahead, and he plays the fireball on tower, and watch these piggies get through and put just a little bit extra damage on.
Literally a little extra damage. That one piggy coming in and getting that hit is the difference of, I mean, more than 17 HP, but it'll definitely cover the bases of that 17 HP. Javi just got robbed, and Ruben remains perfect.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to have a bit of skill, a lot of skill, a little bit of luck to make that happen. And you saw Ruben also making sure that he put that fireball just on the edge of that front inside tower, one tile off, and maybe that fireball gets there a half step late rather than on time. But that on time means he is still undefeated, and now Team Queso has match point against SK Gaming.
Oh, how does Javi bounce back? Can he bounce back? We'll find out right now.
Snowball for the bar barrel, and 3-3 split here for Ruben. Looking like it might be Balloon.
Ruben has just played incredible so far this season.
Ruben's been incredible his whole career. You're talking about what he's done in terms of the number of #1 finishes in major tournaments, right? 3-time Orange Cup #1, 2-time Reno Cup winner, won the Bren Chong Cup Summer Edition, won the Red Bull MEO in Spain, Gamer G, Game June. It goes on and on and on, and that's just his solo accolades. Forget 9 #1 finishes in team play as well.
You see there the oops coming out from Ruben, but still doing okay.
Some guys, Andrew, are just winners. And that's what Ruben is.
Yeah.
He's just a winner.
And that's why it makes sense that Queso has had him on their team, on their side for so long, just waiting for him to burst into CRL in the competitive scene.
Heel Spirit does climb on through, and this is going to be... No, Fisherman pulls the Mega Knight back. Nice high Fisherman, good wherewithal from Ruben. But that Skeleton Dragon gets tanked for a long time, going to be a ton of damage on the left-hand side.
Yeah, that Mega Knight just felt like it would not go down for Ruben. Very little DPS on top of him with that Fisherman and the help of the Princess Tower, and a nice early haymaker from Javi Catorce.
IMJP played this deck beautifully last week for Team Queso. Ruben now going with the same construction, although we have not seen a balloon at all through single elixir.
That Fisherman goes fishing, pulls that Musketeer right in, and anything that Ruben thought was going to happen defensively just kind of gets stopped right there.
Oh boy, healthy Mega Knight. Lumberjack has to come out, but Ruben low on elixir. Javi putting pressure on. Pigs come behind.
Man, the fact that Heal Spirit healed as much as it did is just crazy, but a great recognition of Javi here from his opponent's pit of elixir that seems to be very dry.
Yeah, about 3.5 up right now, and the elixir is Javi Catorce, and now you see the split going from 3-3 to 4-2, just trying to clog up that left-hand side as much as humanly possible is Team Queso's Ruben.
Yeah, the really nice thing for Javi here is he can keep cycling these 2 cards in the back, and then whatever lane Ruben tries to double down on, it's very easy for Javi to kind of commit extra elixir just because of how much attention the Mega Knight demands in the opposite.
The fireball value has been immense so far, and no big spell for Ruben in this deck.
Oh, that's going to do it. That Heal Spirit was just perfect from Javi Catorce.
Undefeated no longer. Ruben finally drops a game in his 7th appearance here in CRL's fall split. Javi Catorce adding his third victory in the 1v1 set.
I mean, just right back to talking about Javi Couture saying when he wants to win, he wins. And when he makes misplays or when he does the other stuff, it seems to get in his head. He's so emotional. And right now, after that dominant win, I'd be pretty scared if I was Ruben right now. I mean, Javi is one guy that we both know can take anyone out on any given day. And Ruben finally shows a little bit of weakness here in the fall.
SK calling a timeout here as we go to the third and final game. In a minute, let's take a look at the replay. And this was a big part of the story, Andrew. Ruben unable to deal with the Mega Knight and the Fireball getting massive value pretty much every time it was played.
Yeah, I mean, Javi did a really great job of being very patient, cycling Mega Knight one lane, DPS unit the other lane. And what that did was it made Ruben pick and choose where he needed to spend his elixir, and Javi always had the luxury of defending and sitting back. Being able to sit back comfortably and kind of play defense where you need it when it comes in, while that Mega Knight is just wreaking havoc on the other side of the board, it just became too much for Ruben to deal with time after time after time. And then you get those late Royal Hogs to come in and take it for that Mega Knight, real tough.
It's just a rare situation where you see a balloon unable to get off, right? You can never see the balloon get in play, and it was you're talking about the ability to sit back and defend for Javi and then pressure whenever he wanted to. So Ruben unable to get it started in game number 2, and we're not going to see a break of the undefeated start to the season record here today. Right now, it's game number 3. Javi Couture, I mean, what do you think is going through his head right now? Got a good game and a good matchup in that second one. He's having a conversation right now with Coach KV of SK Gaming. What do you think they're talking about as they're getting ready for game number 3?
Honestly, in my mind, I think that Javi goes, I've got this in the bag, no problem. He got so lucky in game number 1. This is going to be an easy up and down for me. That being said, on the other side of it, Ruben is so incredibly talented that I think he could pull it off against anyone, anytime, even with a bad matchup. I just think that Javi's going to play with a bit of a chip on his shoulder because of that first game.
Well, I spoke to Javi a bit during the offseason, and he was adamant talking about how he's committed to proving that he's number 1 in the world this season. I haven't heard a lot of players talk about how important that is to them. Javi's one of those guys who has tasted it, has been so close, been to World Finals twice, come so close twice, and I know that he wants it so bad this season. So talk about chip on his shoulder. I think you're right. There's no one who has a bigger chip on their shoulder right now who has more they feel like they want to prove than Javi.
And Javi is one of those guys that he needs to get to the top of the mountain one day. He does, because he does deserve to be on the Rushmore of CRL players. His head-to-head gameplay is so incredible year after year after year. But that's why he's so upset. It's because he knows he's the best in the world. He knows that no one can take him one-on-one. He's going to win most of those BO5s, BO3s, but he just hasn't gotten there yet.
Here we go. Game number 3 once again today. It all comes down to this. Best of 1 for the match.
Javi starting off with Skeleton Barrel early on, looking like he could be going Mortar.
It's the most likely of options, and Knight makes that even more likely. First 30 seconds away, and Cannon Cart comes down for Ruben.
Ooh, that is an interesting little wrench to throw in the system there, just because Cannon Cart's a lot of HP on that guy, and not a ton of single target DPS that isn't spellable from Javi.
Nice little log there to retarget and keep it off tower. Of course, now you have the 3-3 split of the 6-man to contend with.
Yep, and no log or mortar, so it's going to be a lot of goblins on the board.
And Ram Rider in with Mortar out of cycle. No, Mortar does get back to Mortar. This deck goes around so quickly, Andrew.
Yeah, it really does, and that's one of the only reasons why it's as dominant as it is in Grand Challenges and on Ladder. A lot of other Mortar bait decks not able to cycle as quickly and not able to get as much single target DPS on the board because you stack a Musketeer with those Spear Goblins, and it's huge.
And 2 Muskie shots on the left-hand side, so Javi has not been damaged yet, but up on the left-hand side, 1971 left as we pass the halfway point of the first 3.
It's going to be really tough for Javi here as we get into double and triple elixir time, is being able to get through those Royal Recruits and the Cannon Cart and then still have any little bit of legs left to deal with the Ram Rider. Because that's what you're going to get a lot of, is those dual lane pressure pushes, but then one of them is going to get the Cannon Cart plus Ram Rider.
And you see little pressure Spear Goblins just trying to force tools out of Ruben's hand. Wants that bar barrel to be used when Javi wants it, not when Ruben wants it.
And it's really important to do that with this deck, to force tools out of your opponent's hand, as you said, because, you know, you can create so much pressure for so cheap with this deck, but if you do it incorrectly, you'll find yourself wasting 5 elixir on anything like a, you know, Spear Goblins plus Skeleton Barrel plus Logs. It's really easy to find yourself not defending efficiently.
And taking a moment just to wait is Javi, and now pressure as pressure comes in.
Ooh, and that is a great heal spirit to come in from Ruben, and honestly, it could have even went worse for Javi in the left-hand lane had that cannon cart been defended by those Royal Recruits.
Final 20 seconds of regulation. So far, it has been all Javi 14 holding on and keeping those defensive mortars on the board pretty consistently. Knows he can get back to one whenever he pretty much wants, especially as we are in double elixir. Ruben needs to find a way past that.
Yeah, I'm so curious to find out Ruben's, you know, strategy or tactic to break through this front line.
Mortar back one more time, fireball high. Defensively on the Musketeer.
Musketeer does not turn to help out with that Ram Rider, so Spear Goblins do have to come down.
And Ruben, again, I mean, you talk about it being a bait deck. A big part of this deck is, again, trying to figure out any way to not let the Barb Barrel get value.
Oh, the Skelly Barrel.
Although the Skelly Barrel getting value for Javi, but the Barb Barrel not wanting it to get the correct value for Ruben. So you see Javi playing some Skeleton Barrels that you think he knows probably won't connect. And again, we're talking about keeping those tools out of your opponent's hands. Ooh, Log a bit early, Heal Spirit in.
Yeah, so there you go. That's exactly what you're talking about. Barbarian now out of cycle. How will Javi turn this into offense? He's going to want to put his Skeleton Barrel down on offense, but he knows that his opponent was able to get back to Barbs. As you saw there, 3 cards already cycled.
Final 45 seconds. Knight setting high.
Javi's
Ram
towers
Rider cycled in the back here.
have not been touched yet. That's a big fireball in the left-hand lane. There it is.
Huge fireball value, and won't even need the mortar here. Sets up Musketeer instead. Javi still pitching a shutout. Ram Rider Cannon Cart to the right-hand side.
Cannon Cart up high to meet that Knight. Ram Rider going in. Musketeer does turn this time, and Ruben knows that is most likely going to be it. Fireball in, stops everything in its tracks except for that Cannon Cart without wheels.
And doesn't even connect. Insult to injury. Javi 14 pitching a shutout in Game 3 and clutching things up for SK Gaming.
And look at that. I think I heard a vamos out of him all the way over here in Santa Monica. Javi 14, the X Factor for SK Gaming, doing exactly what he's supposed to do. Come out, meet adversity, adjust, evolve, and take home the W for SK Gaming.
It was just an impressive, gutsy performance all the way around, and then went with a deck that, again, we're talking about decks that have outplay potential. This is one of those ones, and one mistake could mean everything goes wrong. Javi had a good matchup, but more importantly, played the matchup perfectly and never made that single mistake.
He really did a great job with his spells and knowing where to get the most fireball value every single time he decided to spend that 4-spell elixir. Every time he was getting massive positive trades, even doubling the elixir trades there. So that is one thing that Javi had perfectly, and you'll see it time and time again. Anytime a big push came in, boom, fireball right on top of it, and Spear Goblins there just in case that Cannon Cart thought of getting a shot off. So many great moments from Javi, but the fireball was the true equalizer in this matchup.
And that push there was the one that felt like maybe, just maybe, it could do something, but Javi playing it correctly, playing it slow, and the patience here, this is veteran patience we're talking about.
Yep.
He sat on that initial damage for the whole 5 minutes, right? He got the lead and then said, cool, you will not touch my tower, and he clearly didn't. Not even a single HP of damage on either side, and that's just lockdown D once Javi knew the situation.
So what does this mean for Team Queso? We've now seen them go 1-1, but it's really been a lot on Ruben. We saw Kuchi and Benny come out great in their first 2v2, but as you said, maybe their opponents weren't quite the caliber of a lot of guys they're going to see moving later into the season, playoffs, and even at World Finals. Ruben, on the other hand of it, he's got to feel great about how well he's been playing, but is it also demoralizing to play that well for 2 matches and still come out with a loss in the second one? And I have to imagine it's still early enough to where he's not thinking that yet, but you add 2 more weeks in, you add a couple more matches in, and that becomes a lot of weight to carry on your shoulders.
Ruben's used to carrying. He's been carrying for a long time. He was carrying for Arena Casito back in SLO and Superliga Orange. He's a carry player. That's what he does. But he's been carrying in the past in leagues that didn't have 2v2, in a place where you could just lean on him over and over and over again. You can't do that here. Team Queso needs to make sure that the 2v2 is a set they win. They can't be messing around in that opening set. Kuchi and Benny need to dial it in and make sure that they win more of those sets than they lose. Otherwise, you're putting Ruben in a situation where he and JP have to carry 2 sets back-to-back over and over again.
Well, and you mentioned IMJP, now 1-2 in his head-to-head career through these 2 weekends, needs to figure out a way to kind of put together his offseason success here in CRL. Taking just a little bit of pressure off Benny and Kuchi and a lot of pressure off of Ruben will it'll just pay off exponentially for Team Queso. It really will if you have just that one other it factor in IMJP, which is honestly what everyone is expecting out of him.
Well, that's why they're putting JP first in King of the Hill, right? It's because they know they're going to go to Ruben most of the time in that 1v1 set. So JP comes out first, and their hope is he blows through most, if not all, of that King of the Hill lineup. If he can get moving, Team Queso's in a great spot, takes pressure off of Ruben. But talking about pressure right now, not too much yet through 3 match days, but we're starting to see a bit of a shift overall in the placement with SK Gaming now moving into 2nd place.
Yeah, Tribe and SK Gaming are number 1 and number 2, and also both pulling double duty, so we'll see them both tomorrow. Dignitas in 3rd place at 1-1. CRB also 1-1 today after that loss. Team Queso 1-1 after that great back and forth that we just saw. SSG falls to Tribe here in the regular season, but what will happen in playoffs? Pain Gaming 0-1, and honestly, you could even call it 0-2 because of that match loss. Liquid 0-1, looking for that first dub tomorrow. Chivas and Misfits still not able to put things together this season. Yes, it's only through 3 match days, so tomorrow is massive for the Bad Bunnies and, of course, Chivas Esports.
And guys, for those of you watching who are questioning, I thought Pain won a match. The match victory, they had to vacate one because of those penalties. So now they have a tough one against SK Gaming. The 1-1 could become 0-2 for Pain in the final match tomorrow against SK, opening things up. Chivas Esports and Team Liquid. And then in the middle, the undefeated Tribe Gaming going up against the yet-to-get a victory 0-2 Misfits, with a young 2v2 duo that needs to get things in gear against currently the best 2v2 duo in the game.
Yeah, we were thinking it might be an additional match loss added, but to take away a match win this early on, not only is it demoralizing because Pain had a big win last weekend that they needed, and Lucas played very, very well. Now, if you look at the record books and years from now, it never even happened. Right? So what does Pain Gaming have to do tomorrow? They have to come out just as angry as they did last Sunday and get their first win of the season. First win, not second.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically just part of the timeline was snipped and taken out. So let's hope that they are able to recover from it. They talked about nerves in their first match. Their second match, they seemed like they'd locked it down. But what does that do to them mentally? We'll find out tomorrow. Andrew, we had a great day of games, some surprising gameplay. Of course, Tribe Gaming taking the win over Spacestation. Dig with the upset against Cream in our second one. And then, of course, what we just saw, SK Gaming locking it down. Who is your overall MVP on the day across these 3 matches?
Man, it's really, really tough. As much as I want to give it to Javi Catorce because of what he just did for SK Gaming, I'm going to give my tip of the hat, my nod to Bale. It really is. I loved what he did for Dignitas today. He came out and gave them a very, very much needed W. He didn't do it all on his own, but he carried a lot of the weight. He's young, he's fired up, he's ready to go. Dignitas needs a guy like that. Maybe Kogigo is the Scottie Pippen to Bale's Michael Jordan. Maybe that's what's going to happen moving forward. But I will definitely give him my tip of the hat for MVP this week. Remember, guys, break time battles tomorrow, Sunday. Go check out Stats Royale. Look for that CRL West 2020 Fall tab and go and see what's going on with battles. Earn your chance to play against a CRL Pro live on stream for all of us to watch and all of us to judge. Rich, who do you have as your MVP today?
It's got to be Bale, in my opinion, right? I mean, because you talk about the position they were in, down against what should have been a win for Cream Royale Betis. He clutched up in King of the Hill, clutched up in 1v1 against X Pedro, played well, played against expectations, and really paid off what he was brought in for. So I think you're right on that one. Because of the situation he was in, Bale's my MVP vote as well.
All right, so let us know at Esports Royale EN on Twitter if you agree with what Rich and I are saying about who is the MVP of the day. Maybe today we'll get another one of those great polls up for you guys to respond to after we started doing that last weekend. Remember, guys, Fantasy Royale, 250,000 gold, 100 gems. Who are the 4 players to get the most crowns in any given week? Not the wins, but the most crowns at the end of Saturday and Sunday.
And hopefully you remember to change your lineups, because of course you have to change your lineup every single week. You're locked in for the weekend, but remember, starting on Tuesday, you can go ahead and make those changes the other way around. Andrew, we're back again tomorrow with another triple header here on the Clash Royale Esports channel. We're looking at Tribe Gaming and SK both coming back out again tomorrow. How do you feel? You just saw both of them come out with big-time wins against probably the harder opponent of the weekend.
I like their matchups. I like both their matchups. I wouldn't be surprised to see either of them pick up W's tomorrow. What I am very, very curious about is what Razor and Team Liquid will do.
We'll see you here tomorrow, 10 a.m. in the West, 1 p.m. in the East, 7 p.m. in Europe. Mañana, mañana. See you then.